Good evening, everybody. We're now calling to order the Bothell Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, October 14th, 2015. So first, we have a lot of people in the public, and it's great. Thank you for coming down tonight. We all have an agenda you can see when you picked it up. So first thing is to call if there's any comments from the public on non-agenda items. So the agenda tonight, we'll be talking about Nike Hill. So anything from the public about non-agenda items, this would be time. All right, seeing none, moving on to the next thing, approval of minutes.
I have
Yes,
something there.
Dave.
Just on July 22nd, I'd like to be noted that I was a little bit late, so I think I was like 5 minutes late, but I was there on the 22nd. So if we get that changed, possibly.
Yeah, did you say which date? July 20?
July 22nd.
Oh, 22nd. I was here on 27th. Yeah, where does that? Oh, yeah. Can we? I don't know. Bruce? Is this to you, or can we make that updated?
Yeah, I'll basically take that back to our staff.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do we have any other comments on the meeting minutes from April 1st, July 22nd, July 29th? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion we approve the minutes for April 1st, July 22nd, July 29th, 2015.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Let the record show the minutes have been approved. Moving on to new business. Do we have any new business? Anyone? Bruce? Anyone? All right. Well, let's just jump right into it. So we have a public hearing tonight, and this is the 2015 docket plan code amendments, Nike Hill plan, Shelton View, Meridian, 3rd Southeast sub-area. So we've got a lot of people in the public here. Thank you for coming down. I'm assuming most of the people here are here to talk and testify about that. The basic structure here is we'll first start off with a report from staff, from Bruce. He'll go through some slides. The commission will have we'll have a chance for some immediate questions, and then I'd love to jump right into the public hearing, and we'll go get testimony, and we'll hear from everybody here. And then we'll switch over to the commission having a discussion and asking the questions that the commission has. And then nothing's going to be decided tonight. There's not going to be any action tonight. We'll just carry it on with the agenda. So that's the general structure for how it'll go. First, I want to check with the commission if anybody has any statements that they want to make. Yeah.
I would. In anticipation of tonight being a full house, I printed out some thoughts, and I just want to put this on the record. I've been a commercial real estate broker for the past 10 years. During that time, I've worked on 500-plus transactions as far south as Vancouver, Washington, as far north as Mount Vernon, east to Spokane, and west to the Olympic Peninsula. As such, I bring a real estate background and experience level to my role on the Planning Commission. Coast Equity Partners, or McCoast Property, which we'll be discussing tonight, is a sister company to Coast Sperry Van Ness, which is the brokerage firm that I'm affiliated with. And in reality, I'm actually an independent contractor to Coast Sperry Van Ness. I am not an employee of Coast. And I have no economic gain on any recommendation from us to the City Council, nor on any decision that the City Council would make on the Coast site. So there's no conflict of interest in my not recusing myself from this topic. I do have a vested interest, excuse me, in the outcome of the sub-area, as I am a resident of the city. I want to see and help guide environmentally responsible development on private land within the city. To assume that if we raise a ruckus, that a developer will simply go away and leave the land untouched is foolish and short-sighted. Rather, they would most likely end up regrading the site, filling in a great deal of the canyon areas, and building to the maximum allowed by code, which in this case would basically mean leveling the hill completely and eliminating any open space. Our task, as I see it tonight and over the next few weeks, is number one, look at the big picture, to include the entire sub-area, not just one site or two sites, but the entire sub-area, and determine the highest and best use for that entire sub-area. Ideally, that would involve retaining quite a bit of open space. Additionally, minimize traffic congestion and impacts to areas that are already over capacity, i.e. the Canyon Park area. Our role also is to guide responsible development to meet the city objectives on, again, private land, while still permitting developers to make a profit with their land without what I would call deforestation of this area. And if there's an opportunity for us to encourage affordable housing element into the mix, I think that's a plus for the city as well. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any statements that they'd like to make?
Yeah.
Please.
It's great to see everybody here tonight. And I wanted to just make a similar statement to what Commissioner Stedman just said, in the sense that I, too, have a relationship with Coast. It's kind of unique. This has really not happened, at least since I've been associated with the Planning Commission, where two of us have some type of there's at least a question in terms of the relationship. I have the same type of relationship that Commissioner Stedman just described. I am not an employee of Coast. I am an independent contractor, and I will in no way financially benefit from the outcome of whatever the outcome of that parcel or any of the parcels involved in this project. And so I definitely spoke with the city attorney about this. I wanted to make sure that I fully disclosed my relationship with Coast Brokerage, which is that I'm an independent broker for Coast Brokerage. And he assured me that I am not in a conflict of interest. So I wanted that to be said from the very beginning. I won't repeat. I share many of the same goals that Commissioner Stedman just outlined, but I'll add a few more. We're celebrating this week the opening of McMenamins in Bothell, and I think most of us would think that's a good thing. It's going to be a real asset to our city, and I really believe that a business partner like McMenamins has come to Bothell because they saw back in 2008 and 2009 a group of citizens come together and had a real vision for downtown Bothell. There were various objectives. There was the Main Street businesses that wanted to have their businesses get be even more successful. There was a transportation. We needed to reroute roads and highways. There was a transportation need. And then many of us just wanted to have a renewed kind of cultural heart and center to our city. Investors see that type of vision and respond to it. And I really believe McMenamins is here because of that. I hope that we have the same type of process that occurred in the downtown sub-area plan that resulted in 08-09. I was not a part of that. But since I've been on the Planning Commission, I've really wanted to fulfill that plan. It was a healthy process. People were passionate, but they also listened to one another. And I can tell you, I certainly am coming in with my own point of view, but I am here to listen. And listening does not just mean, oh, I listen and now I'm just holding on to my point of view. Give me some information I haven't thought of, and I mean, the guys up here know that their arguments can sway me. So I have in no way made up my mind as to any parcel in this project how the outcome would be. So that's the process. In terms of goals, Commissioner Stedman pretty well outlined them, and I won't repeat them. I'll just say that I do want to make sure that if housing occurs, there's a lower cost housing. We need more lower cost housing in Bothell and options for a variety of citizens. And I want to deliver a recommendation that increases the benefit, whatever the benefit is, to the greatest number of Bothell citizens. So those would be some goals that I would add in addition to the ones that Commissioner Stedman outlined. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Roger Cecil, and I've lived here in Bothell since, I think, 97. Been here a while, and I love it here. I am a civil engineer by trade, and I have a company here in Bothell, and I have clients including cities, school districts, healthcare districts, as well as land developers. And I'm an engineer, and I design infrastructure, and I do cost estimating and that kind of thing. In my line of work, I have and am currently doing some work with Coast Equities, which I believe is related somehow to MC Coast. So I just wanted to clarify that and make sure that's out on the table. I don't believe that's going to affect my ability to be objective, but I want to get that on the record and so that everybody knows that. So thank you.
Thanks. Does anybody else have anything that they want to say before we jump in? Yeah, Eric, please.
I do. My name's Eric Clark. I had a question for Bruce, and maybe this is not for this time, and I just want to clarify that in your memo dated October 8th on page 1, you talk about the fact that no action was taken at the study session, but there was some direction, I guess, provided by the commission for future topics and that sort of thing.
Yes.
I have a question about one of those things that you report on. Is now the time to discuss that, or will I have an opportunity to talk about that later in the meeting?
Well, we'll certainly have an opportunity later in the meeting, and I'm going to go through a presentation that maybe that will
Okay,
get to some of your items.
great. Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, there will definitely be a chance for that. But before we jump into Bruce's presentation, does anybody else on the commission?
I have a question. Roger, are you currently involved with any projects with Coast on this property?
Yeah, are you talking to me?
Yeah.
On this property? No.
Yeah. Okay.
Nor in Bothell.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. I guess then at this point, Bruce, can I hand it over to you and
Absolutely.
let's jump
Well,
in?
I want to introduce Tom Burdett, the Director of Community Development, who's going to be here to assist me tonight, and I'm going to let him say something as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. It's my pleasure to be here. If I can lend any hand or advice to the commission, I'm happy to do so. Thank you.
And then back to me. Basically, the idea was that I want to introduce some exhibits that I put up on the dais for you. Those have kind of come in since we prepared the packet last week. That's SV8 to SV13, ranging from 4 emails, a PowerPoint presentation, and a letter from the North Shore School District. That's up on your table for you. Those will be included in future packets. So basically what we'll be doing is we'll be adding these exhibits as we go through the process, and those, of course, will be put online. At this time, I'd like to go through a little presentation. It might take a little while, but I think it'll help set the table for us as we kind of begin our discussions and maybe answer some of the questions that maybe everybody has. So, excuse me. So, of course, as we all know, let me get close to this one. As we know, of course, this is the Planning Commission public hearing, the first one you've had, that basically on the 2015 Comprehensive Plan and Code Amendments deferred action items, and this includes the Shelton View Neighborhood Activity Center. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about public hearing processes. Basically, a public hearing is a formal legislative process where the Planning Commission receives testimony from staff, residents, property owners, citizens, and other interested persons. And the public hearing offers an opportunity for participants to offer in a non-judgmental manner their opinions and thoughts about what may be happening here. And one of the things we ask is for people to kind of avoid demonstrations, clapping or booing and other things that might intimidate other participants from offering. Maybe they have a minority testimony or something like that. And again, I want to emphasize that all opinions are valued and we always are respectful for others. And this is not the final hearing on this topic. We have 2 more scheduled as of tonight. That is November 18th and December 9th. Those 2 meetings will be in the new City Hall. So it'll not be this place, but you'll be basically across the street. But I just want to let everybody know that there is that ability to have future hearings. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Planning Commission because some folks may not know what the Planning Commission's role is here. And essentially, the Planning Commission is a group of residents appointed by the Council who have volunteered to serve as Planning Commission members. The Planning Commission serves as an advisory capacity and is charged with formulating recommendations concerning growth management policies, actions, and implementing regulations. The Planning Commission is not a decision-making body. the commission will make a recommendation, which will be forwarded to the council for the council's consideration. It is the city council who is the legislative body that makes all decisions regarding comprehensive plan and code amendments, which is basically what we are doing tonight. Now, I'm going to give a little bit of background on why we're here. During the 2015 periodic plan and code amendment, and that's basically with a 2-year process we just finished, 2 property owners within this area submitted requests to change the plan and zoning classifications of their properties. One was Mr. Malik, and the other was MC Coast or Coast Equities. Now, due to a state-mandated adoption date for this update, there was insufficient time to allow the proper review of those 2 property owner requests, and they were deferred to the fall and winter of this year and early next year. This deferral also is a benefit because it gives the city the ability to kind of step back and take a more comprehensive and thorough review of this potential neighborhood activity center. Now, what are activity centers? Activity centers are shown within our comprehensive plan under figure ED1, and it's basically locations within the city where it's appropriate to encourage compact, walkable neighborhoods with a mix of residential, office, and retail uses. The city of Bothell has a number of these activity centers ranging in different size and different flavors, from the very large regional activity center, which surrounds the Canyon Park area, to a couple even specialty activity centers, which is the Country Village Shopping Center. This sub-area has one of those activity centers. And this is basically a blow-up of figure ED1 that basically shows the activity center identified within the plan, and this kind of puts that onto a street map, if you would, so you can kind of see kind of what the configuration is there. Now, one of the things we do is whenever we start one of these processes, we kind of go through and apply some filters to pieces of property when we're going to look at these things. Are there areas that make a lot of sense to consider as part of the study area? Areas that don't make a lot of sense? And essentially, after we applied those filters, and they're kind of basically outlined with you in your packet, this is the area we thought was the best to take a look at when we start this process and have these discussions. Now, there's a number of properties associated within this area, and MC Coast and Malik, the 2 property owner requests, are outlined in red. But we also have the Army Reserve and FEMA offices. We have 2 DNR parcels, Department of Natural Resources, one down here by Shelton View Elementary, which is right here, and one along Meridian Avenue. We also have the Canyon Ridge condominium site that basically is just off 228th Street Southwest, and we included the Freeling sand and gravel topsoil site as kind of an important thing because it's kind of like the end, if you would, of this area. And, of course, the area of most concern for us is, of course, the area around Meridian Avenue and 228th Street, which is where the activity center is mostly focused upon. And I'm going to kind of go through real quickly these different sites so we kind of have a background of what they are. Of course, the Army Reserve FEMA site is 40 acres. It's the largest property within the area, and it has Army Reserve classrooms and offices, as well as they have a lot of storage. FEMA, or Federal Emergency Management Agency, has some of their operations within this area. That includes some offices, some storage of facilities, as well as a very large communications aspect of this provision. Now, staff has contacted both of these agencies and has had a dialogue with both the Army Reserve and FEMA about this property, about whether maybe there's some future for maybe doing something different up in the northeast corner, or maybe some other things. And again, the Army Reserve, which is the actual owner of the site, who FEMA just kind of leases, has a license for part of it, have identified that they have absolutely no interest at all in doing any planning or any changes to this site in the long term. They are very firm that this site is going to be necessary for their, basically their mission, if you would, within this area. So they are very adamant that they don't really have any plans to do anything different on this site. The first of the Department of Natural Resources property is about 26.5 acres or so. And this basically just kind of wraps around the Shelton View Elementary School, and it's basically to the left of or west of Shelton View Elementary. You can access it from 7th Avenue West. One of the things about this property is it is a trust land, and when we had some testimony before from Department of Natural Resources, they've identified that trust lands mean FEMA has a requirement to provide some type of a benefit from a financial standpoint to the state, and whether that's through logging or leasing to private interests, or even some cases land sales. That is one of their charges they have for these land trust properties. The second DNR property is, again, a land trust property. It's about 7 acres. Now, both these properties have got some trails, some pedestrian trails to them, and people have been using them for a long time, and they're very pleasant areas to walk in. Another property I want to talk about real briefly is the Fruling site, which is the sand and gravel. They have a little retail activity center that you can buy sands and gravels and things like of that nature. And, of course, as everybody knows, the history of this site, this has been a sand gravel extraction site for many, many years. And it is actually in Snohomish County. It's actually not in the city of Bothell. And basically, the reason that we wanted to include this is there may be a method that we could maybe use this property as an access to the MC Coast site to the east, basically to maybe so we don't have to go in different provisions there. And, of course, here's the MC Coast property. It's about 16.5 acres again. It has a lot of varied topography, some steep slopes, some hillsides, some ravines, ridges, you name it, it's got it. And what happened is the owners of this property submitted a comprehensive plan amendment request as part of the 2015 docketing, basically that process. And they had originally asked for R-AC, which is Residential Activity Center, because of its adjacency to the Neighborhood Activity Center. However, they've amended that request. They're actually after an R4000 designation. One of the things I want to identify is that, people are always saying, well, how did you get to this site? They have a current 50-foot wide ingress-egress easement across the Canyon Ridge condominiums property, which is the next one I'm going to speak to. This is a 75-unit attached condominium development. The gross area is 16.9 acres. The zoning is R9600. Now, that is a detached single-family zoning in the city of Bothell. However, everybody says, well, how did it become an attached dwelling unit within the city of Bothell? This project was actually vested to old Snohomish County regulations before it was annexed. And basically, that's the old grandfather clause. That basically, if you have a complete development application or building permit application, you are subject to the laws in effect on the time of that complete application. And in this case, that complete application occurred in Snohomish County. When they came into the city of Bothell, we've completed the review and processing of that, but it was vested to the Snohomish County provisions. So that's why this project, that even though it was annexed to the city in 1992, which is a long time ago, it was considering Snohomish County regulations. One of the things the commission kind of asked for was what is kind of the relative density of the Canyon Ridge development? Basically, we were trying to get an idea of what kind of density this property actually had. So what staff did is we kind of came up with a net density and net area provision. And in yellow are the areas where the project was built upon, the places where they put their facilities, their open spaces, some of their parking, and the buildings. And that area was about 7.25 acres in size. So if you divide that, take 75 units, which is how many units there is, divide it by 7.5, that's a kind of a net density of 10.3 dwelling units per acre. If you take the entire site and divide it up, it's a net density of about 4.4 dwelling units per acre. And in here, I can show you some of the different density provisions within the zoning classifications: R2800, R4000, R5400A, and R9600. The net density that is closest is the R4000 designation. The gross density is the closest, the R9600 designation. Now, I also wanted to spend a little bit of time in talking about the Malik property, which is right here in the northeast quadrant of the intersection of Marina Avenue and 228th Street. It's only about 0.3 of an acre in size. It's not a really huge property. However, Mr. Malik has identified that maybe some different zoning would be appropriate here. Again, this is supposed to be an activity center. This is some of the other Meridian parcels, and we have parcels that range from about 6,900 square feet all the way up to 44,000 square feet, with 44,000 square feet is just about 1 acre. We also have some current zoning on these areas, and I wanted to put this slide up here so that people can see right now the intersection area, if you would, the activity center, has an NB, or neighborhood business designation, which is a retail classification, which allows retail facilities. That designation goes south about 200 feet into the DNR site, and basically north about, I lost my arrow, about 360 feet basically within there. There's a couple small retail facilities in this location. There's a little latte stand here in the corner. So that's basically what that is. The Army Reserve Center in FEMA is designated as R9600, MC Coast R1900-600, and the DNR sites are 9,600. So basically, those are the designations that you have within that study area. Now, one of the things I wanted to do is, again, as a way for us to start thinking about some of these things, is I've thrown some concepts out for the commission to consider as we go through this process. And that includes maybe assigning an R4000 designation to the MC Coast and Canyon Ridge condos, maybe coming up with a new designation for the federal facility or federal center. I was thinking about maybe just assigning it an office professional designation, but that doesn't really describe what's there. And maybe perhaps we can come up with a new designation of federal facility or something of that nature. I've seen some communities have MIL or military. I don't know if that's really quite the facility that's appropriate. As well as, of course, this option would talk about an RAC designation within this area here. And, of course, no change for the DNR property next to the school. And, of course, the Fruitland site would, again, also be not changed. Option number B is just a little bit different, a little bit less density, if you would. We're going to an R5400A designation across the Canyon Ridge and MC Coast. Again, no change for the Department of Natural Resources facility. And a lesser residential density along Meridian Avenue, as well as a little smaller area for the the activity center, R2800 versus RAC. They're very similar in nature. But one of the things that was kind of interesting about this is that right in this corner here, we actually have 3 fairly new houses, and there's a brand new short plat that was just approved in this location. So there's 6 new houses in this, basically just in this part of this activity center. Finally, zoning option 3 is, again, some contraction here and there and some changes. However, I wanted to bring up one concept that the commission has identified before, and that's this clustering concept. And maybe that's one way to think about for the MC Coast property. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is that a clustering option could allow that detached single-family zones to cluster the developments into a smaller footprint, thereby preserving more open space without rezoning the site. Instead of going to a attached residential designations, keep the R9600, but allow a fairly interesting clustering development provision. Currently, the Bothell Municipal Code really doesn't have a lot of abilities to cluster developments within single-family residential zones. We have a planned unit development provision, but it's a pretty small clustering, and again, it does not allow you to do attached dwelling units like townhouses or any type of multifamily within that. Again, the only option now that we have, if we decide to preserve large portions of a piece of property, is assign an attached dwelling unit designation like the R5400A, R4000, R2800. The commission may want to direct staff to explore this a little bit further, and here's why. There's a couple of R9600 parcels that have been developed in the last few years here, and of course this is the property extent is outlined in red dashed lines, and you can see the R9600, because it does require a minimum lot size and a minimum lot dimension, essentially fills up the entire parcel, leaving very small amount of area for open space. In the city of Bothell, we used to have some clustering provisions that were fairly innovative. And what you can see here is that this is, in fact, this is Dover Station. It's a single-family residential project, but there's a large area of open space they were able to preserve because of the flexibility they were assigned. A really good example of that flexibility is the Canyon Ridge condominiums, which also did this pretty significant clustering, basically placing their homes along the ridgetop and leaving most of the area open space is basically undeveloped. Another example is Regent Wood down in the southern part of the city, which again did a multi-family look. It's a condominium project, but again, significant areas of open space. So those are all options that could potentially be explored as a clustering provision that would allow the city maybe not to have to necessarily rezone these parcels if we wanted to continue to maintain large areas of open space. So I'm going to stop at that point because I know a lot of people are getting antsy about me being up here so long. And I've got some new contact information I wanted to have everybody see up here, and we can put it up there again. In 2 weeks, we're going to be in a new building, so a little bit different address. There will be, of course, some transition time, and I also have a new telephone number as well. So these are some of the things we'll start distributing out to folks as we get through the process. But thank you, and that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Bruce. That was great and very informative. What I'd like to do next is, if there are immediate comments that we have from the commission, this would be a good chance to ask. And then I'd like to jump in. We have a lot of people that came out from the public, and so we'd really like to get a chance for them to be up there. But first, any immediate comments from you guys before we jump in? Yeah.
Bruce, was this was on our, is this the list of exhibits?
Those are, yes, those are the new exhibits.
So there are a number of, looks like emails that came in that the staff has printed out for us, as well as a presentation, looks like biodiversity overview, and then also a letter from the North Shore School District. So I just want to acknowledge that we've received it. Thank you very much to each one of you who did write. I will be reading it closely, and I would encourage all of us to do that.
Will this be available to the public as well, Bruce?
It will be, yes. Essentially what will happen is that in the next packet, it'll be part of the packet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bruce, that was a great presentation. I really appreciate that. Would you, the last thing you showed, which was the pre-existing cluster developments in the city of Bothell, thank you. This is intriguing to me. You know that already. I'm a proponent of clustering, but I think this really illustrates it well when you look at this site and see that. My guess is, and I've never really looked at any of these projects, but the underlying density of these is probably no different than the underlying zoning was. But what this afforded was the opportunities. You can see by the amount of green that's on these projects, the amount of essentially undisturbed area is pretty significant compared to the ones you showed before. And I noticed that the upper right is the Canyon Ridge condos. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Look, and I think looking at the numbers that you guys pulled together, this, the way this is developed is almost as if it were R9600 that was allowed to be clustered, because the overall density, the gross density, is about the same as an R9600. Is that right?
Almost exactly, 4.4 versus 4.5.
The difference being that obviously this, the homes are tighter together, but I think one thing that is interesting to point out or important to point out is that in a clustering situation like this, generally there's a buffer around the property so that from the outside it doesn't appear that the density is any higher than the surrounding properties, and sometimes even lower because of that buffer. Maybe it's an undisturbed area or forest, retained forest or something like that. I think we all probably, if we thought about it hard enough, could see examples of exactly the opposite. Bruce showed a couple of those on a previous slide. But, there's a couple that really stand out in my mind. Bridlewood is the project in South.
Yeah, it's currently called Bentley, I think.
Bentley, yeah, sorry about that. Bridlewood's across the street. Bentley is one that there was a real strong push, if you're familiar with Bentley, was a real strong push to do something from a clustering standpoint because it had significant sensitive areas. It had significant topographical constraints that weren't sensitive areas but would have made sense to not do development on. At that time, there was a big push to do a clustering ordinance, and it was the owner of that property at the time was one of the main proponents of that. That ultimately was not approved for a variety of reasons, and ultimately what happened was instead of being able to develop on the areas of that property that really made sense, basically what was discussed earlier, that basically the entire site was graded out, and it resulted in homes that were of the maximum size, now R9600 square feet, and and the same density as it would have been in a clustering situation, but but it was basically basically leveled the whole hillside, cut down virtually all of the trees that were not part of a pre-existing critical area. So I want to throw out there that, I know, Bruce, you're suggesting that if we want to see that, we make a recommendation that be studied. I, for one, would be a strong proponent of looking at clustering as a way to get the density we need per the Growth Management Act, but also do what's clearly shown here, which is retain significant areas of open space. So I would be a big proponent of doing that. I'd like to hear input from the people here today as well as the fellow commissioners. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bruce, thanks for your presentation as always. That was really well done. And I also want to thank you for doing the walk through the Shelton Woods. I don't actually know if I don't believe this clustering option was on our study, under our study session. It came about because we walked the woods. I think you saw some of the steep terrain, very steep hillsides. And I think that's where the potential of clustering may be warranted is looking into. And I just want to verify myself. I'm not a developer. I don't develop properties. But so if somebody owns a large tract of land and it's zoned 9600, let's say, as one of the commissioners up here just referenced, so that, I mean, the average lot size is 9600, correct? So
Correct, yes.
Right. So if a developer wants to develop on a hillside, they don't have to develop the whole property, right? It's just to maximize profit. Is that right? I mean, they could essentially develop 9,600 lots and leave part of the property in perpetuity as open space as a benefit to that community, right? Or is that not a possibility?
Well, certainly it's a possibility, but that's kind of like going to your car dealer and buying a car and saying, leave the 2 tires off because I really need 2 tires. The economics of the situation are that a developer has to get that number of lots just because of the costs associated with that. And so we have yet to see any development in the city of Bothell where the developer purposely walked away from like half of the property or something like that in development. That's just not the way the economics work for those folks. So they have to buy the entire parcel. And usually the property owners are saying they're selling the parcel for the most money they can get. And so developers are almost forced to do that.
I guess, and we'll get to this later, I guess, because we're talking about a lot of parcels and we're really focusing, I think, on a regional activity center. Is that right? I mean, neighborhood activity center?
A neighborhood activity,
right.
Yes, yes.
And I have more questions about that because basically FEMA is essentially out of play now, and it's kind of right in the middle of that. And then there was some information in our packet with regards to if they were to expand in the future, they were to be doing it up near the intersection of Meridian and 228th. And I'd like to hear more about how and there needs to be setbacks because it's military. And I also agree with your redesignation of the FEMA property as federal to make it more obvious to people. Yeah, so I can't remember what I was about to state there. But I guess I'll be interested to hear more about the property too, because it's my belief that, I understand developers needing to make money and cost of projects, but it just seems like this parcel of land, with example, the MC Coast property is actually appraised at fairly low amount, and I think the rate of return for that company would be quite large if we were to upzone it. So that's just something I wanted to point out, and but I appreciate your presentation. I'm looking forward to discussion up here and from hearing from people in the public, from the citizens.
And I just want to add just a little bit about the Army Reserve site, and that is the fact that they do have some very specific distances they have to maintain from their exterior perimeter area. And as it was explained to me by the gentleman I've been working with, their point of contact individual, right now they don't really meet those minimums right now. So it'd be very hard pressed for them to do much over here without running into one of those security things that they're taking very seriously nowadays.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, because that would have a lot of effect on what we wanted to maybe do at that intersection. Thanks.
Roger?
Thanks, Bruce, for your presentation. A couple of thoughts. I agree. I think I agree with coming up with some kind of zone that reflects kind of the nature of the Army site. But I guess what I would want to avoid doing is sticking a zone on there that precludes, and I know the chances are minuscule of the FEMA and Army walking away from that, but I think it's our job to plan for kind of all the scenarios that could possibly happen. And so if we could, I understand the concept, I guess, of putting a military zone on there, but if there's a way that we can make a caveat that says that, hey, we've thought about this, and if it does become available or is vacated, then here's, because that's really our job, is to plan, right? And by saying, hey, we don't have to worry about that parcel, I think we're kind of missing the boat a little bit on planning. So I guess that's just a general comment. And then the other, I think, with that cluster option, I really, I design sites all the time, and, there used to be a lot of flat land available, and it didn't have wetlands and streams on it, and all that land's gone, and the only thing left now is generally stuff that's steeper or has some other kind of hair on it. And so with that in mind, that cluster option to me is really, from a site design standpoint, what you see now, if you have stuff on hillsides, is you have these huge retaining walls to just create enough flat area for building pads and roads and that kind of thing. And so from my standpoint, from a kind of a minimizing disturbance kind of a perspective, I really think the cluster option is very much worth exploring. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce, for the presentation. I would like some more information about the clustering option. Sounds like that would be in the City Council's court if we provided direction. Based on reading in the packet, it looked like they would be the ones to take that ball and run with it?
Yeah, I think what we would do is that the commission would have a recommendation that we could take to the council to say, the commission has recommended that we look at this in a much more detailed manner and have the council formally initiate that type of a code amendment. We don't have to do a plan amendment with that. We have to do a code amendment.
Okay. Some of the potential negatives I thought of with clustering, Commissioner Clark addressed. One was, I think in certain sites it definitely makes sense. But if we're spreading that across the whole city, you might have some development that's out of character for the neighborhood. You were talking about buffering with trees and forests that are left in place, and that does seem like a good implementation of that process. But I could also see the potential downside that throughout the city, if there's people held up with critical areas, we might be increasing density in specific pockets. Or how would we get around that if we put the clustering?
And I think what you would do is you would craft a density calculation that would exclude things like critical areas and critical area buffers and exclude roadways and those things, just as we do now. So essentially what you'd be doing is that you'd be coming up with the developable area, and you'd figure out what your number of dwelling units you could have there, which is exactly what we do for a planned unit development now. And then you take those units, that number, if it's 35 or 100, you take that and you allow that to be smaller. The same number, but you don't basically say, well, we'll let you have 150 instead or something like that. You don't do that. You do set up a cap, because that's the only way we'd make this work. Basically, it'd be the best way to do it, because you'd have that similar number of houses and they'd be just smaller.
Right. Okay. I have a lot of questions. I don't really want to delay the public testimony because there's a lot of people here. Also wondering if there was anything new to report from DNR. You and I and John Keats met a little while ago to discuss that property, and that's a large component of what we're discussing today as well.
Well, I can report, and then I'll let John, wherever he is, take over. Basically, on October the 8th, which is last Thursday, the Parks and Rec Board directed staff to start working with Department of Natural Resources to begin that process of acquiring the DNR site. That's the one that's the 26-acre one. And that was like last Thursday, so it's going to take a while to gear up for that. So that'll be reported, and we'll start that discussion process.
Okay. Thanks. And I just have a general general comment. I should have disclosed this earlier, but I do not work for Coast Equities, but I do live in the Shelton View area, so I'm very familiar with both the opportunities and the challenges we have here. As a commission, we haven't looked at anything this size outside of maybe the Canyon Park business development. This is massive compared to what we've looked at for the last at least 2 years that I've been on the commission. So to reiterate what was already said, we are not obviously the deciding body. We just make a recommendation. But it's our job to get in-depth knowledge so that our recommendation is in line with the citizens of Bothell.
Right.
I appreciate everyone coming out today.
Thanks. I had one clarifying question for you. So we've gone through all these different zoning regulations, R96, R4000, etc. And for all of them, you clarified what they were, except for R5400A.
Oh, I'm sorry. R5400A is the basically is an attached dwelling unit designation that allows one attached dwelling unit for every 5,400 square feet of net developable area. And basically, as opposed to the R5400D, was detached. Basically, the difference between attached and detached is detached has to be one house on one lot. Attached, you can have 2 or 3 houses on one lot. That's basically what the difference is between attached and detached.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah.
Bruce, can you clarify something on this clustering? If it's currently zoned R9600 and there's a cluster overlay, does that mean that it could be built similar to the condominium complex that's in front of it, or would it need to be changed to a different zoning in order to be able to cluster or group all of the building in on a smaller footprint?
Well, tune in later.
Okay.
That'd be one of the things we'd have to start evaluating is if we went into that kind of an approach.
Yeah, because candidly, my concern is if we just blanket, approve okay, let's go. They're asking for R4000, and McCoast sells to John Doe, and John Doe sells to Bob Smith, and Bob Smith looks and says, "Hey, there's an R4000. Let's scrape the hill and let's put a bazillion residential units there." That's not what we're trying to do. So there's got to be some type of a governor on there to cap what can be done, so that we can still maintain some open space and yet still allow a developer to develop something that makes sense for that specific area. That makes sense?
No, and that's exactly what we would have to craft some type of a maximum dwelling unit cap for any given property, and it'd probably be based upon the underlying zoning. An example would be R9600. That's basically 4.5 dwelling units per acre. That would be the maximum you could get. So
Right.
we would use some mechanism like that to establish what that maximum number would be.
So that would be the governor that would basically, okay.
There you go.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yeah, Eric.
Just one more thing. I wasn't aware of the discussion, the Parks Board recommendation. I'm really excited to hear that. I was fortunate enough to be able to walk around in the rain last week for about an hour with Katie and yourself and a couple other commissioners, and it's a beautiful place, the Shelton View Forest, I think. I'm not familiar with that area. I live on the other side, the south side of Bothell, but the first time I've ever had a chance to walk that, and I was shocked by how beautiful that is. And I think the concept of the city engaging in discussions with DNR, I think I'd love to hear what their thoughts are specifically, but I think that's a very encouraging sign. So, thank you.
And there's one more thing I wanted to get clarified, and this may have been a comment that you made, Eric. I wanted to understand. So what happens if we do nothing? If it's currently 9,600. If we did absolutely nothing, does this mean that a developer could still come in and grade and cut down and build, and potentially lose the vast majority of the open space and the vast majority of trees there?
Do you want me to respond?
Well, I guess you had made a comment about that. Either you.
Well, let me give my perspective real quick. This particular, the MC Co's property, if there are no critical areas on that, which I don't think we know, I've not heard one way or the other. I've heard that there's an idea that maybe there's not, but I don't know. Essentially what that would mean was that they would have that entire site available to them in their density calculation, minus roadways, public right-of-way and that sort of thing. So in essence, what they would be able to do would be to calculate their density based on the majority of that site area. And then if there were no critical areas, they could essentially use that entire site how they saw fit in terms of the grading and the cut and fill and that sort of thing. That's my perspective. Bruce, I'm not sure if you...
I think that's generally correct. And a really good example you identified was Bentley, another one was Piper's Glens, where there was a lot of extensive grading on both of those properties, much more so than we ever expected would be economically feasible. But at housing values today, it is now economically feasible to spend a lot of time and effort on those type of earth-changing activities. And that's why, the clustering provision from a staff standpoint, we like that idea, and we would love to explore that with the commission and the council.
Thanks. So at this point, you've all been very patient. Thank you. We'll open it up for public testimony. Procedurally, the way this works is just come to the podium, just state your name. Usually we take address or whether you're a resident. We'll take the address for the record. And then you've got 3 minutes. I think Bruce will help us with time there. So that, and also as Bruce mentioned, we've got a lot of people. Statistically, the odds of everybody here agreeing is extremely low. I'm an engineer, so I kind of geek out on things like that.
There we go.
I'm counting the numbers here. So we want to hear from everybody, and I'm expecting a very wide range of opinions here. So please, you're going to hear things that you think, yes, this is exactly what I feel, and you're going to hear things that may make your head explode, and we want to hear it all. So just be respectful of everyone. We actually ask that you not applaud and cheer for things that you passionately agree with, just because with a group this size, that can be suppress minority opinions, and again, we want to hear from everybody. So with that, the podium is open. Please tell us what you think.
Great, thank you. My name is Patrick Crosby, Crosby Homes Incorporated. And I had a quick question, first of all, to Bruce. Is any of this, could this be designated as different pieces, or is this all going to be all kind of collectively looking? The reason I'm asking this is because I have a parcel that's involved in the 9600 that is proposing 5400 on the street on Meridian. And I'm wondering if I could take my parcel individually, or is this going to be part of a lump package here, because I'm pretty much getting caught up. We have a 9600 zoning, but right next door I also have properties where, actually I'll just read what I wrote. We have property located at 23127 Meridian Avenue South. We'd like to have it rezoned from 9600 to 8400. Crosby Homes has just submitted a 15-lot formal plat adjacent to the south of this property, located at 23205 and 23211 Meridian Avenue South. Crosby Homes Incorporated was a participant in discussions with the latest rezone that was entered into the new comprehensive plan on June 30th, 2015. During that time, I wrongly understood the boundaries of the rezone area, and consequently, the area in discussion was not included in the new changes. So pretty much what I'm saying is that I also am under contract with the parcel to the north of the Trinity Church and which is commonly known as the Beasley's property. So I'm right there on the east side of Meridian on 232nd. I'm kind of getting caught up in this whole quandary of this whole, 5400 and these ones and all cluster and all that kind of stuff. I want to know, can I ask for my property to be rezoned for 8400? Since I missed out apparently on the comprehensive plan, even though I wanted the property to the zoning to extend there, or am I part of the big conglomeration of these big parcels?
Bruce, can you comment on that?
Well, I'll just do it from here. Those are all things that can be discussed. We're pretty wide open as to what would be done, and basically if we can get a little bit more data from Mr. Crosby as to which parcel it is, maybe he can kind of outline to us what that would be. That would help us to add that into your next discussion meeting, which is on the 18th of November.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Currently, there's a house in the location. It has caught fire and now is in a state of disrepair. It has garbage and building debris spread out throughout the property. According to at least one of the neighbors to the south and a little bit the neighbors to the north have stated there's been street people around there periodically. Looks like I've found drug activity and things like that on the property. To make matters a bit more complicated, the owner is now deceased, so I'm actually purchasing the property now from the trust. So basically, my contract is for a year with them. If I could get this property rezoned, I would like to demolish the house and clean the property. As it currently stands, if it stands under the 96 zoning, I'll have to wait and see what happens in the future to the property. And and to address, even though I am a land developer and a builder, and I've built over 1,000 houses and done 20 probably plus developments, I've never really tended to want and build clusters myself, but I do see the need for it. And I do know, I know there's going to be a lot of people opposed to this, but you're exactly right. As a land developer and a builder, we have a lot of different resources at our disposal. Even though they're costly, the price of the properties now are so expensive that if we want to do soldier piles, there's all kinds of options to us to be able to build in places that we never used to be able to build before. And the property's so expensive that, you know, economically, it is worth it to us. What's not worth it to us is come in and make it so the zoning is such where basically you can just say you can't develop that. Clusters are definitely much more sensitive, in my opinion, towards keeping a lot of the area pristine and out of the development, because he's exactly right. If it was me doing that development and it was 9,600, every single inch of that is going to be used. And then you use lot size averaging, things like that, to get around or to work around your wet zones, your sensitive areas. And clusters are definitely worth a strong consideration. And I'm saying not that because I don't build them and I don't do them, but people also need a place to live, and not everybody wants to mow a big yard, you know. So things have kind of changed. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hillary Sanders. I live at 325 233rd Street Southwest in Bothell. And I live near the property in question, the MC Coast property, as well as the Shelton View property. And I'm basically here to express my concerns that the upzoning of this area would result in significant damage to and loss of sensitive and critical habitat. And let me just say that based on the conversation that I've heard, that there is no guarantee that an increase in zoning density or this clustering, as we've been talking about, would result in less land disturbance. So that's a concern of mine. Just for a little background, I'm a student at UW Bothell, and in my time there I've had the opportunity to take environmental science classes, which allowed me to conduct the biodiversity study that you have in front of you. And I just wanted to let you know that this is limited and it's not complete, but I'd like to just highlight a few of the species that are in that packet. One of which is the great horned owl, which I believe is one of the first ones on there. We have 2 resident owls living in the MC Coast area and the DNR property. They use this entire space. These 2 owls mated in 2015. And they use the whole area for hunting and using the cedar trees as shaded areas during the day. And they were heard as recently as October 4th in this area. And I mentioned that they mated earlier in 2015. And in June of 2015 this year, there was actually a young owlet spotted with the 2 resident adult owls near the McCoast property. And we estimated it in the picture there to be 5 to 6 weeks old. And so this was a very exciting opportunity for the people who use this space for hiking, for running, for taking pictures, whatever people's interests are. They use the DNR property and have seen the owls interacting in this space and around the MC Coast property as well. The other species that I want to point out is the pileated woodpecker. And these birds have been seen throughout this property, and they require standing deadwood for food and shelter. And this property has a lot of those kinds of resources there. The picture there isn't mine. They're very fast and hard to catch, but if you're in that area, if you spend some time there, you'll hear them pecking and calling. They're very loud. And we've seen them often just hiking and being in that space. So these are just two of the species in that 45-page packet. Sorry about that. That I just wanted to point out to you. And I see these as an opportunity to reflect and think about what we'd be losing, not just trees. If we lose our forests, we're also losing other things as well. I just want to also point out that upzoning this property would result in highly dense housing that would destroy these sensitive and critical areas that these species rely on for habitat. And in addition, this parcel, the MC Coast, sits on the Swamp Creek watershed. So though there may not be surface water that you can actually see, a development in this area would impact areas downhill just because of water that percolates through the soil and it ends up in lower land communities. So I just want to have the Planning Commission keep that in mind. Just kind of as a last point, I think that we, being the Commission, the city, citizens, developers, need to keep in mind that once we develop these areas, they're gone. We can't get them back. So I guess my question would be, are we going to be fine with 10, 20, 30 years down the road and we look at our community and we don't have these open spaces anymore because we were concerned about profit or development, that our children or young people won't be able to learn about species like the great horned owl or the pileated woodpecker? And so before we upzone, before we develop, I would implore all of us to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hillary, I got to follow you. I talked today to Kathleen in Canyon Ridge Condos. She has identified 25 species of birds.
Pardon, can you state your name and address for the record?
I'm Bob Rorobaugh. I live at 22724 2nd Place West, directly across 228 from the Army Reserve Building and the FEMA site. I've lived in the area, that home, for 28 years. Roger Cecil and Blake Stedman, we go back a lot of years. I've been running through those woods now as a 68-year-old man, and I'd take on anybody in the room. There is steep sand.
And you would win.
There is steep sand, and at one point I turned 5 shovels wide, the steepest of the sand trails, and invited my son's high school cross-country team over. But that's another story as to how I embarrassed them in my 40s. 25 species of birds. I want you to meet Kathleen. I've been running in the woods, and I would have to say that, Bruce, I'd love clarification as to where MC Coast might strategically want to cluster buildings. Because if it's on the least sloped hillsides or the least sloped, that would be the heart of what I consider to be Bothel's gem of an open space, wild place, not unlike talked about in the book Last Child in the Woods. I grew up in Whatcom County near the Swift Creek, and when the slide on the mountain took place 2-3 miles away, our creek filled up with silt. It feeds into the Sumas Creek. That in turn feeds into the Fraser River in Canada. Today I obtained water from a lake surrounded by 360 or 320 homes of Wandering Creek. This is lake water. This is subsoil I took from a random place. It's not a scientific sample. I don't know the proper depth. All I know is that I dug a hole to get this, about halfway up a slope. I'm saying this because I didn't bring enough copies. I didn't know how many commissioners there were. But I have copies from John Francis, who is the chairman of the Lake and Streams Division of Wandering Creek. And in here he alludes to activity north of them, not the housing development. The housing development runoff feeds into a drainage ponds, but Crystal Creek doesn't know the rules. Crystal Creek has been eroding this kind of soil. It's in one place near Wandering Creek. It's 6 feet deep and tangled with roots. And if I fall in there, my question is, could I, a healthy young 68-year-old, get out without assistance? I would ask Bruce, take note to walk the length of Crystal Creek and see to what extent it's eroding. But anything that happens at Frulings and anything adjacent to Frulings might do this. They've had a recent incident of milky water. This may settle out by the time I'm done, or it may not. And I forgot to tell you the lake is called Reflection Lake. So I've got pictures on my phone. Bruce, if you had helped us with our PowerPoint, this would have been much more convincing. I've got pictures on my phone of a silt delta forming where the mouth of Crystal Creek feeds into Reflection Lake. He could not be here tonight. But
Mr. Rohrbaugh,
Yep.
Really appreciate your testimony, but just in respect for all of us, we're right at your time. But thank you very much.
I am curious. Well, two or three questions I would
Yeah,
ask.
can you wrap it up in the next couple
Yes.
of minutes?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
I took a young man who works for a development company in there. And in the DNR land, he said, Bob, I may do you more harm than good. He said, I need to know how you see it through the lens of development as opposed to the lens of open space, wild place. It's easy for him to do because he has 3 grade school daughters, beautiful little blonde girls, that ride mountain bikes. He says, I went to Shelton View Elementary, but I've got St. Edward's Park in my backyard. I will be bringing my girls here, but he looked around and says, this would be easy to develop. I said, well, come with me. We walked into the ravine, and he went silent. We couldn't hear any traffic. Normally, I commute an hour and a half to a trail that's as lovely. And then he climbed a lesser grade, because he's a young man and can't keep up with me. He said, this would be extremely difficult. He said, tell you what, I'll take your approximate map of trails, and I'll draw up the parcel on my computer. I'll run it through a CAD program. I will make you a map. You've got miles of trails in here, and anything else I can do to help. I didn't tell him my agenda, other than this is an incredible wild place. This is an incredible open space. South Bothell, East Bothell, North Bothell all have significant large parks. West Bothell doesn't. Bruce, where would the children from a cluster, to which elementary school would they go? Both schools overmaxed now. I think the city has said, no more portables, you're full. Where would the children of a cluster go? And how would you access or egress 2 cars per 100 home 3, 4, 5 times a day in and out of a driveway? I was almost late tonight because at the corner of 2nd Place West and 228th, I was the first responder to another accident. traffic backs up from 4th Avenue West to Meridian? Have we addressed the schools and the infrastructure of roads? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kate Walter. I live at 23705 7th Avenue West. We're just south of the DNR property. I'm seeing a lot of friendly faces. Thank you for taking the time to walk the woods with me. You can really see the value of both properties. One thing that's been talked about is clustering potential, and I think that it would also be very helpful to know what clustering reality would really look like. I would ask if the Commission would consider having an open house, and MC Coast could bring proposed plans. What does it look like at clustering at 9,600 or 5,400 or 4,000? Get a chance to speak to you, get a chance to speak to the City Council. I think this is a very large issue. As Mr. Cabe said, it's one of the last big pieces that we have. What you're seeing with the turnout here, my second point is this turnout is almost entirely word of mouth by people who lived very close and then told their neighbors. I think this is such a critical issue, the zoning of this particular piece of property, that I would request that we expand the notification area to where the city is notifying of the planned changes in development. So many people just don't know that this is about to happen unless they have happened upon neighbor to neighbor that this is going on. So neighbor to neighbor, this is what we've got, plus a petition with over 600 signatures. I think that tells you how invested the community is in this particular parcel. Thank you.
Ms. Walter, thank you very much for hosting us the other day. I really appreciate it. I know the others that joined us on that morning do as well.
Good evening. My name is Janet Fernandez. I live at 132 234th Street Southwest in Bothell. I have lived here for 14 years, and please forgive me for not looking you in the eye. I haven't memorized my speech. So, with regard to the rezoning classification, while it is true that there is a condo on 228th, much of the area is single-family housing. Suggesting the area should become a neighborhood activity center with the thought that it will ease traffic down the hill is not taking the area capacity into consideration. A neighborhood regional center at 228th and Meridian will not ease traffic going down the hill because people are already going down the hill to get to the freeway. Frank Love Elementary is at full capacity, taking 347 extra kindergarten students, along with the 500 existing first through sixth graders. And Shelton View Elementary is at maximum capacity. At their PTA meeting last night, the Shelton View PTA discussed the fact that they have no ability to handle any more students. I'm sorry. And no plan as to how they will accommodate more in the coming year. Rezoning the West Coast property would put an undue strain at an already maxed out neighborhood school system and road capacity. What is the solution? The Puget Sound Regional Council has already provided the solution. For those of you who don't know, the Puget Sound Regional Council oversees area growth in a huge area, including Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue, and areas north. They've developed a plan called Vision 2040, which is an integrated long-range vision for maintaining a healthy region, promoting the well-being of people and communities, economic vitality, and a healthy environment. Canyon Park is one of 27 such regional growth centers. That's where the density is supposed to go. It has the land. It is served by the regional high-capacity transit, major highways, and other transportation services. It has the Sound Transit pedestrian bridge to provide access to pedestrians into the area. But according to data collected by the 2013 regional monitoring report, Canyon Park has 173 areas of vacant developable land. That was according to the 2013 report. It is the most underutilized and underperforming regional growth center in the Puget Sound. And we have it in our front yard. It doesn't make sense to increase the density up the hill, a road that is already overtaxed with residents and traffic, to an overloaded kindergarten hub, and to continue to neglect the regional growth center. I agree that Coast Equities has the right to develop its property. Please look into this before you make any unalterable decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, hi. I'm Val Warren. I live at Canyon Ridge Condos. And, well, this is probably about 3 weeks ago or more before they're doing some work on Bothell Everett Highway and 228 there. So it is even more congested. This is before they had really started on that work. I had gone onto 228th Street off of 99, 228th Street Southeast, and it was rush hour traffic, but it took me over a half an hour to cross just over Meridian. And what really concerns me is the Furlan property, which you're really talking about, these really high density condos. One thing about that property is the view. There's, like you said, there's not a lot of big plats of property, but there's even fewer ones with absolutely beautiful views of the Olympic Mountains. And it just seems like that we could find some other way that could satisfy the investors, but be able to utilize this absolutely gorgeous view, whether it's, trying to think of a retirement village or something, and those people use a lot less cars. They usually have shuttles that take them to the store or whatever, and yet, you know, if you could have a dining room looking out over that view or whatever. I mean, you were the builders, but to really think about the tripling the density on 228th Street, which is now so congested. So I think we're all, and like this other person said, there's hundreds of homes. We just showed a little piece, just a little piece of everybody in the community on that area should know about what you're thinking. And I understand you have investors, you need to recap some of your money that you've invested and so on, but I don't think it's a good idea. Thank you.
I did want to clarify one thing. When you said that you have investors, I just want to be clear that we don't have investors. Maybe that's a more general you as an MC Coast out there, but as Bruce clarified in the beginning, the folks here are just residents trying to make a recommendation. If we do nothing, there's a lot of possibilities that can happen that could take away a lot of trees, and we're looking at different possibilities that may actually preserve quite a bit of the open space. Yes, please.
Yep. Hi, my name is Joe Farron. I live at 23903 7th Avenue West. I live just south of where the DNR property is. I purchased my house with my wife about 3 years ago, and when we purchased our house, having the forested area was exactly what we wanted. You know, we lived in the city. It was busy, people all around, it was noisy. We wanted a nice quiet place where we had an outdoor area where, you know, we had a park in the neighborhood that we could walk to, we could be in a peaceful place that was quiet. I was really shocked when I found out just 2 weeks ago that that whole area was actually two parcels. I had thought that it was all DNR property, and I was really disappointed to find out that development was going in, because I don't know, it felt like the neighborhood I thought I was moving into was not what it seemed after all. I really support any efforts to minimize the impact of that area, whether it be not by allowing upzoning to put in more houses or more people. I understand why people would want to live there. It's a very nice area. And I guess along those lines, what I read in the information packet for this meeting, there was a letter from the, is it MidCoast or MC Coast group, envisioning an area that was that had mixed use and had some higher density housing, and it was described as becoming a vibrant area like the Mill Creek Town Center. Well, I could have lived in the Mill Creek Town Center. I don't want to. I want to live in the neighborhood that we have, and I would appreciate it if you could make all efforts to preserve that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Betsy James, and I live at 23231 8th Place West, and I'm to the west of the DNR property on the south end. And I just want to speak as a mom of 3 boys, and I want to speak for the kids that use these woods. And so many kids live in houses that just have a backyard, which is great. But the exploration that comes through these woods is incredible. I've raised 3 boys, still raising 3 boys. I have no problem getting them to go outside. My friends that live kind of far away are so jealous. Kids want to come over, and every time a friend comes over, they're like, can we go in the woods? Can we go in the woods? There's the coolest stuff out there, and we've seen coyotes come down the ridge of the hill. It's phenomenal. My kids have looked a coyote in the eye. I mean, they were near me and far away, but it was still really such a wonderful, wonderful experience here in Bothell. We hear the woodpeckers. We see the woodpeckers at night. We hear the coyotes howling. It's fantastic for these children. They go out there and they're creative. They're digging. They're building. They're exploring. And it's a great place for them to explore. As a mom, it's a serene place for me to walk when I need a break. I can just go, and it's really like being transported somewhere else. But I just feel for our children, we don't have enough places for them like this, and we need to preserve as much as we can, because even if we're doing bigger lot sizes for houses and people think that is great, a backyard is so different than unexplored territory. They feel like explorers out there, and the things that they find, and the things that they touch, and finding out that stinging nettles sting, and finding out that rubbing ferns on them helps, or even if I find something that looks like it, that might help too. It's phenomenal for them, and I just think we owe it to our children. We owe it to our children to preserve as much of this free space as we can for all children, and to make it as accessible. And a lot of the DNR property already really operates as a park, and as a neighborhood of the community, as a person in the community, when I walk through, I'm meeting new people, and it's just a fun place to see happening, and I would just hate to see it disappear in any way. So as you're looking forward to making these decisions, and I know you have a lot of people to keep in mind, but I want you to keep my children in mind. My 16-year-old son in the front here that has grown up in those woods, his 2 younger brothers that are dying to go out there, they're waiting for, I mean, Cameron can go walk alone with the dog out there now, and those little boys, they want to walk, but they're not allowed to yet. But it's been so fun for them to grow up there. So when you're making those decisions, please keep those faces in your mind. Keep those dirty fingers and dirty hands in your mind, that they can't get everywhere, but they can get in those woods. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dan Olson. I live in Canyon Ridge condos.
I'm sorry, sir, what was your name?
Dan Olson.
Dan Olson.
I live in Canyon Ridge condominiums. I've been there for 20 years, and when I have a bad day, I can actually go out my door, don't have to drive anywhere, and go hiking in the back there. It's cool when the fire station goes off, all the coyotes, yeah, it's really cool. We have owls, we have everything. Last summer, we had a cougar pass through there. So the habitat there, if you develop this, will be lost. So.
Hi, My name is Jackie Sanders, and I live at 325 233rd Street Southwest in Bothell. I have the FEMA site in my backyard and am adjacent to the thin stretch of DNR property that heads down the hill toward the private property and the school. I've been there for about 17 years, and it is, as many of you found out apparently, a very beautiful, majestic, peaceful area to visit. I guess what I'm noticing the most these days is that it's hard to get out of my neighborhood. It's hard for me to turn out onto Meridian left or right when I'm on my way to school in the morning. And I've seen lines of cars down toward that Canyon Park area, which supposedly now is being fixed. But it's my understanding that the fix isn't really going to increase the capacity that that corner can tolerate. It's just going to allow for smoother turning, or I'm not quite sure, but I have to have a lot of ingenuity every morning on my way to work, because I can turn one way and find out, no way, that's not going to work. I've got to try something else if I'm going to make it to work on time. So I think it's really important for our city to consider how we want to grow, and honestly, I don't feel any responsibility for the developer to get the most out of his money. When they're buying properties and they go in and look and say, wow, would this be a good investment? Am I going to be able to develop this in a way that allows me to make money but keeps the people who live in this area also satisfied with the area that they chose to purchase in? It's their responsibility, in my mind, as members of our community as well, to consider the entire community when they're developing. So I hope that if they don't get exactly what they had in mind, that they don't do, as you said, just go in there and mow everything down because they can. That wouldn't be responsible in our community. So thank you all for your interest. Thank you for the ideas that were brought forward. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I appreciate you actually getting out and padding through the woods. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Scully, and I live at 23820 7th Avenue West. I just want to make sure it's on record that many members of the Bothell community are deeply troubled that two of the members of the Planning Commission, Mr. Booth and Mr. Stedman, are associated with the same umbrella organization that owns the Coast Equity Properties parcel in question. The citizens of Bothell are still very sensitive to this issue, real or perceived, of conflict of interest, particularly in the wake of the Wayne Golf Course situation. With the utmost respect, we would like to request that these two gentlemen recuse themselves from voting on any zoning changes for this parcel. Thank you.
It is so nice to see all of you in person. My name is Sandy Alto. I live at 19012 90th Place Northeast. And unlike pretty much most of the people here, I live on West Hill. And I have lived in Bothell for 27 years in the same house in West Hill. And I was very involved with the city when I first moved here because there was a kerfuffle up there between neighborhoods about where the bus routes should go. And then I went to work for Microsoft for 15 years and retired and traveled around the world, and then came back. And now I'm a contractor for Microsoft. Like you are contractors for Coast, some of you. So as a contractor, I have quite a lot of influence at Microsoft on decisions that are made. A lot of the Bothell community is feeling the crunch of the development that's gone on since the 2008 recession. You know, we have this small opportunity to build before the next housing bubble. Unfortunately, the North Shore School District hasn't taken an opportunity to increase impact fees on development, so we've missed that opportunity, and now we have schools that are 3 times their capacity. And I took this summer to drive around and look at some of these schools, and it's hard for me to believe. Bothell is turning into a third world community. 40 portables at Frank Love. I mean, it's now beyond sad. We are in one of the wealthiest areas in the United States, and we have let development run amok. Now, I know that some people say that it's the consequences of the GMA. That may or may not be true. I personally am not against the city going up, but I do think that this is a very rare opportunity that we have to look at the big picture and create a bond levy that supports parks, that allows the community to get together and try to purchase some of these properties along with whatever grants we can get that include the Wayne land, the DNR land, if possible, if we can negotiate with Coast, and that's where your influence may or may not have an effect on whether that negotiation could go forward, and some of the other properties around the city that people feel are really, really important to the health and the well-being of the future of Bothell. So I want to say something else. I have no children. I do not have to live here. I could live anywhere. I live here, and I'm not going anywhere. So, you know, I do feel terrible that I was sleeping during the Imagine Bothell plan, because I do like that plan. I like it a lot. So my time is up. I do want to say one thing. It's only in the last few weeks that I have been really watching the Planning Commission meetings, and I realize the kind of work that you do here. And I appreciate it more now than ever. So thank you very much.
Sandy, I want to make a quick comment, if I may. I have zero influence with Coast Equity Partners.
Pardon?
I have zero influence with Coast Equity Partners, with the owner of that land.
Okay.
I mean, there is... That's kind of like you working as an independent contractor for Microsoft and trying to influence, you know, HP. It's a different company.
Yeah, I actually have influence with HP, though. Yeah, you have a lot of actually influence with hardware vendors when you work for Microsoft. So I'm just saying. Okay, thank you very much.
But thank you for your comments.
Good evening. I'm Cheryl Stanford. I live at 24203 7th Place West in Bothell. And I would also like to call for an open house that would clear up just what is planned and what is possible for the MC Coast land. Their website describes a gated community of 40 single-family homes on generous lot sizes with views. And that seems to be very different from what we're hearing is possible here. I also wanted to point out that on your city-produced maps, that seems to show streams running through the land, which would indicate critical areas. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lorna Smith, and I live at 9710 Northeast 188th Street in Bothell. You're looking at an opportunity to provide more housing, but let's consider an opportunity to maintain the current level of neighborhood character and reduce the negative impacts on the future adjacent parkland and maintaining Bothell's reputation as a desired family community. I believe an open house to further discuss this issue is needed. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jill Stewart. I live at 205 244th Street Southwest. and I've lived in Bothell for 22 years. I've worked in Bothell. I'm a teacher in the North Shore School District. I just work down the hill at Kenmore Elementary. And Kenmore has the fortune of being surrounded by Wallace Swamp Creek Park. We have the Swamp Creek wetland below us. We have our own little arboretum. And these outdoor classrooms, is what we call them, are an invaluable resource to our schools. Kids love to get outside. They need to get outside. And we have over 500 kids in our school this year, which is up over 100 from what we had last year. And we have a couple little outdoor after-school education programs. So out of just over 500 kids, we have 100 kids enrolled in those programs. They love to get outside. They need it. And this seems like a wonderful opportunity for another school, Shelton View, to keep those beautiful natural areas that help their students. And as someone mentioned how the North Shore School District isn't doing enough, well, I'd argue the state is not doing enough. The North Shore people have again and again passed levies for our district. North Shore people who live in North Shore are the most generous citizens in our state. And so I'm not going to blame North Shore School District. They are strapped to the pavement on what they're able to provide this year. It is scary to see what's happening in our schools. But that's neither here nor there. I've walked in that park for 22 years. I love that park. Yesterday I went to a cross-country meet there. I made a point to park on the low side of it so I could walk up through the park to get to the school. And you walk in there, it's just like a church. It's so beautiful in there. And that's great, 40 houses, wow, what's that? 150 people live in there? This piece of land needs to be saved for all of Bothell, not just for 150 people, so they can have a nice view and some builders can make a big pile of money. It needs to be saved and protected for the citizens of Bothell. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Randall Olson. I'm a land use attorney at Karen Cross and Empleman. My address is 254 2nd Avenue, Seattle, Washington, 98104. I'm here on behalf of MC Coast, the property owner that several people are talking about here tonight. Coast Equity is the entity that owns the MC Coast property, but for the sake of consistency, I'll just refer to it as MC Coast. It sounds like a lot of people have enjoyed the DNR site and the MC Coast property. I'm glad to hear the city's talking to the DNR about that property. I watched the last Planning Commission meeting and saw that there's an interest to sell that property, and that's a big parcel. It's certainly bigger than the MC Coast parcel and could make a lot of sense. MC Coast has not fenced its land off to other folks, and it sounds like people have enjoyed that over the years. Right now, the site itself is, the applicable zoning is R9600, and it's a private property. Obviously, it was purchased to be developed, and at some point it will be developed. And the question I think that's important for the commission is just how so. And we're here to request that it be zoned R4000. For several reasons, I think that this makes a lot of sense, and there are some clarifications that I think that need to be made about the differences in zoning that are out there. First of all, R4000 is vastly superior to the existing zoning. I mean, right now it's R9600, and that's what could be developed today. There's under 9600, each dwelling unit or home must stand alone and be placed on a lot that is a minimum of 9,600 square feet. I think there was a question earlier about whether it's an average of 9,600 square feet across the parcel, but it's a minimum lot size. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case. It's a minimum lot size, so you have to carve out 9,600 square feet minimum and put a home on it. So what that does is it incentivizes maximizing the use of the entire site rather than the term clustering has been used, but I use the word concentrating development, and that's what R4000 would allow for. It would allow for concentrating the development rather than having these minimum lot sizes. So the distinction is, unlike R9600, R4000 is based upon the net buildable area, and you can have attached units. So rather than having a minimum lot size you can only put one house on, you add up the net buildable area, you can concentrate that development in areas where it makes sense, away from slopes. You can maximize the number of trees and other natural vegetation that can be retained on the site, while at the same time having some level of density on the site that allows you to meet your GMA goals. You can look at the slides that we had here tonight. The Planning Commission packet, I think at page 2, shows some examples of single-family minimum lot size developments. You can, in the lower right corner, I think there's an R8400 site, and you can see there that there's not a lot of vegetation that's left. The Canyon Ridge property, as is mentioned in the packet, was developed at an equivalent of R4000. And I invite people to compare those two. Compare the single-family site in the lower right corner to the Canyon Ridge project, and see that R4000 is what we're asking for, and that's what the Canyon Ridge project was developed at. And it's under that zoning, that R4000 zoning, that you can do that. You can concentrate the development. You can work around the areas rather than having to grade and clear the site to develop pads where you can put your driveway, your house, your front yard, your backyard, and maybe a tree in the back. That's an important distinction, I think, that needs to be made. As I mentioned, 9600 is the zoning that applies now, and that's what could be developed. That would mean large lots, and that would mean large homes. That they would not be entry-level priced homes. I know that was the question that the commission had, was the affordability of housing in the city. So I wanted to make those quick points. If you bear with me for just a second, the other the R9600 with clustering, it's an interesting concept. That's not a zoning classification that exists in the code. So some work would have to be done on that. In the interim, the existing zoning is R9600, so that's the alternative option that Coast Equity has to develop under until something changes. But we really believe that R4000, if you want to look at a representative project, the Canyon Ridge condo project is developed under that same general zoning designation. The Fruling property to the west is the equivalent zone of R2800. So if you're talking about fitting into the overall scheme, and I think that's what you're looking at, is the overall scheme of this entire plan and rezone process, it would make an intelligent transition between different zones. And we look forward to the next meeting and more comments, and we'll have more to say, I'm sure, then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ernie Bellasy, 2614 242nd Street in Bothell, and I know a lot of the people that are in this room. I served on the Planning Commission for 8 years, so I know what you're going through right now. I live on Maywood Hill, and I'm one house away from the North Creek Forest, so I know exactly what you people want to preserve. That was the same thing that we had going on up on Maywood Hill. But I do want to bring up some things that have been said here tonight, because a lot of numbers have been thrown out there in R9600, R2800, and so forth and so on. 9600 is 4 houses per acre. 2800 is triple that number. Obviously, with the piece of property that we're talking about here, they're not going to be able to develop at the full potential at 2800 because of the topography. Now, we saw some clustering illustrations up here that talked about how that could work inside of our city. What they have said, or neglected to say, that all of those had topography problems. So they had to have smaller developments on it. They could not develop at the 9,600 or the full 2,800, whatever that was. And the other thing I have a question on, Bruce, is did you mention RAC for this area? When you were talking about the military property and all of that, did you mention RAC or Neighborhood Activity Center?
RAC was one of the items.
Okay, and RAC is QFC property, folks. Thrasher's Corner. That's an RAC. So I want to make sure that everybody understands when they start throwing out this terminology that you know what they're talking about. We're not getting that definition from anybody. The other thing was, like I said, sitting up there for 8 years, I had never seen an explanation like Bruce put up tonight on what the Planning Commission functions are. I don't know why the reason for that, but again, like I said, for 8 years I never saw that. We talked about clustering when I was on the Planning Commission back in 2005, 2006. We don't have an ordinance in the books. And I don't believe you can take one piece of property and make it clustered development. I think if you're going to do that, you're going to have to do it for the whole city in the BMC code. You cannot factor out one piece of property. So you're walking on eggshells if you're going to say you're going to do that with this just one development. I think you have to come up with some kind of language that's going to affect the whole city. Okay, the last thing I want to bring up, and some lady mentioned it earlier, is the relationship that two of the members have with Coast Properties. I went to the website, and I did see that you work for a sister corporation of Coast Properties. Now, I deal a lot with corporations. I know a brother-sister relationship. It all goes back to the top. And I just think that you two, even though they may not have any kind of remuneration from whatever comes out of this in the future, because, again, you're only a recommending body. You are not making any decisions on how this is going to come out. But I just think ethically you should step down. You should not be up there making a decision or recommendations that's going to go forward to the city council. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come to the podium? I want to make sure that we've had a chance to hear from everybody that's come out tonight.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Schreiger. I live at 9319 Northeast 175th Street, and I'm also on West Hill, like Sandy. And I would like to echo her thoughts. We have a forest right next to where I live, and similar sort of situation, smaller forest, but it's planned for it to be developed. And when I heard about what was happening with this property, you know, I had to come out and support, because, you know, you've heard a lot of opinions here, and you said that there would be a diversity of opinion. Well, actually, there really wasn't too much diversity. There was one person that had a different opinion, and he's legal representation for the owner. So, you know, I think that, first of all, I understand we've exceeded our mandates for the Growth Management Act, so we're really not having to develop this property in a very dense way to satisfy the state. That's one thing I want to get out of the way. The other thing is, I wish that when you're making decisions, that you would take first into consideration the people that already live in Bothell, that are property owners that bought in existing neighborhoods, that liked those neighborhoods, because it seems to me that the whole city is being developed for people that want to move to Bothell, that want to drive through Bothell. And what's happening as a result is, you know, those people are getting, you know, lots of houses, and in the process, our environment is changing, and it's becoming a different city. And we want it to grow, but we want it to stay the same sort of, you know, have the same qualities that we appreciate now, and I think we can do that. I think we have to look at ways to incentivize builders to build in a way that will protect the environment. And I think that there should be an open house about this, because I think no matter how you slice or dice this property, it's going to ruin the natural environment if you build homes on it. That seems pretty clear. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for having us tonight. I'm Brian Sears. I'm actually the president of Canyon Ridge Homeowners Association. I live on the property. Over the years, Bruce and I have had a lot of conversations. Usually it starts out by a bunch of surveyors showing up on our property trying to figure out how to get into the MC property. And every time the surveyors tell me it is a very difficult process to just get access to develop it. Well, there's a lot of issues, and there's no way I can cover them in 3 minutes. We've got easement issues. We're actually going to lose usable property that we currently own once that developer develops that property. It's going to split our property in half. It potentially hurts our property values. We lose parking. It's going to force people to park on the streets, which for me creates a life safety issue, because now we got to worry about getting fire trucks in when they need to get in. I think the biggest thing is this is going to happen. I'm a realist. At some point, that property is going to get developed. Just be really careful about how you let somebody do it. I think we need to limit the impact not only to the natural areas, the wildlife, the deer, the coyotes, but also the people who live there now and the properties around what's being developed. And I'd love to have an opportunity to sit down with you and go deeper into the easement issues, the traffic issues. Furling's had a plan a while back to develop their property. They were going to add 155 homes on top of the MC property development. The traffic now is horrible on 228th. With all that development, it's just going to get worse. So, thank you.
And can you pass your contact info on to Bruce, just so we can take you up on your offer to talk further? Thanks. Do we have? We have someone.
Hi, my name is Lynn Anderson, and I live at 16600 98th Court Northeast. I don't live in the Shelton View area, but I'm a very big fan of saving our open spaces. I was brought here a year ago because of Wayne Golf Course, and I've never left. I've come to every city council meeting since that time, physically, and they listen to your recommendations. So you may say it's just a recommendation, but at least 4 or 5 of those say, the Planning Commission studied this, they surveyed this, we're going to go with their recommendation. So we can't make the public feel like there's going to be another process. What you guys say, they really take into consideration. And they don't make a ton of changes unless the community gets in an uproar. And so we need to be very careful about telling the public that you aren't the decision-making body, I would agree. But they do go on your recommendations, and they speak about you and say how hard you've worked, so why would they go against what you've said? So I'm concerned about that. I am concerned about having to upzone. The property owner wouldn't want to do it unless it was in their best interest. I don't believe that they're looking at the best interest of preserving land. I also am concerned about maybe the mission statement of some of you up there. It doesn't sound like your mission statement is to preserve for the people who live in Bothell. I heard somebody say that it was you were wanting to get the developers to make money. And that's what I heard, and I'm going to have to go back and listen to the tape, but I agree with this speaker in that we need to look out for the people that live here now. The traffic it's a lot of traffic, and the housing, I've only lived here, I'm on my 4th year, and the number of houses that have gone in around me is so much. And at some point, our schools are overcrowded, our traffic is too much. It's not the Bothell that I moved into 4 years ago. And we have to look at that. We have to say, I believe that it should be what's best for Bothell, not what's best for the developer. And we will not get these lands back. So we need to come up with a plan to make both sides happy. And I'm very, very concerned for the outlook of Bothell in the future. And I would say to all of you, we need to go to the city council meetings. We need to stick up for all the open space land, because we won't have any after a while, and then our children won't have places to play. So that's just kind of my statement on that. So thank you.
So anybody else that hasn't spoken yet and would like to come and share some testimony? I can pass the rest of them down. One, two, three, four.
Good evening. My name is Janet DeGrave. I've lived in the city of Bothell for 33 years. And my handout this evening, very briefly, the first 2 pages talk about the cities that have regional centers should be focusing growth in those centers. So the first 2 pages you see are the 3 pages that are from the regional plan that Janet Fernandez talked about.
Pardon, can you state your address for the record?
211 233rd Street, Southwest Bothell, Washington 98021.
Thank you.
Then the next, I didn't get as many copies of the next one because my printer ran out of ink. But the next copies I have are from a 200-page binder that I've been collecting over the last 23 years. And it goes as follows. For the first page is dated April 17th, 1992. Talks about, Dear Ms. DeGrave, thank you for your invitation to attend the community meeting you have called for April 22nd at Canyon Park Junior High. As I related to you earlier, after receiving a number of letters and phone calls, earlier in February, I contacted our Parks Department and requested that they look into a park at this location. And goes on. To the City of Bothell, thank you for your letter, which was received August 7th, 1992, regarding ideas for a park in the northern portion of Bothell. And then it's October 15th, 1992. And then there's a letter from Rosemary McAuliffe. Thank you for your letter regarding saving our trees and green spaces by the FEMA agency. I will look into this matter. And then there's one dated June 1993 of Janet at the sub-area, Janet at the Planning Commission, Janet at the Planning Commission December 1993, Janet at the public hearing in May of 1994, Janet over here talking to Michael from the Snohomish County Land Trust in June 29th, 1994. Then you see Janet again talking to the Snohomish County Council in September of 1994. Then you see Janet again in February 23rd of 1995, talking to Dear Representative Barry Shullen and Capital Budget Committee. I want to inform you of the land that needs to be saved. Again, another letter from Janet, 7/10/1996. Dear City of Bothell. Another, Janet volunteered again in 2003, and she went to all of the updates. She went to the original, where we all planned
how many acres we wanted for the city of Bothell to set aside for parks and open space. And Janet has just learned that the state of Washington has decided to, and the cities have decided to cut back on what we had planned in 1992. So we have actually lost 3 acres in our city as of 2014. Then I would call attention to the last page where it talks about the federal facility. And I would recommend it being definitely zoned as a federal facility, because there's not usually a office park that I've gone into where I've had to take out of my wallet my ID. And I've been asked not to bring my dog in with me. And I've gone through a metal detector, et cetera, and seen the reserve people running around and driving. When I was out there picketing just a week ago, most of them went down to the bottom of the hill to eat their lunch. One gentleman walked over and had his lunch at Pizza. The last thing I wanted to mention is I did call in June 1st, 2015. I called MC Coast and I asked if their property was up for sale. And I heard from, I believe it was Steve Booth, and he said, well, let me ask the person who owns the property. I'll get back to you. So I called again, and he said, well, as far as I know, the person I work for wants to develop the property, but he would consider it as a park. Thank you.
All right, last call. Do we have anybody else who hasn't spoken yet that would like to come to the podium?
Good evening. My name is John Keats. I actually work for City of Bothell, Parks and Recreation Director. So I'd first like to give a big thank you to Bruce. The Parks Board really had no idea of what was going on with your planning effort here. So the DNR property, which has been referenced, has always been a property that's been on the radar screen. It's in the Parks and Recreation plan as a potential acquisition for the future. And as Bruce did say, they did make a motion or asked me to try and pursue this further with the Department of Natural Resources. So I did call the Department of Natural Resources this week and talked to a gentleman who works in Commissioner Goldmark's office, and in just a courtesy call, they are willing to discuss the future of the property with the city. What transpires from that remains to be seen, but they looked at it as, in their intention, they would prefer to see it stay as a natural open space park, however you want to classify it. So I just wanted to let you know tonight that I'll be following up on that and see what happens, but given probably the purchase price and that I would guess that property would go for, we would probably be looking at a fairly serious fundraising effort, grants, what have you. So it would take a period of time, and I guess that's what we'll be asking from them is see if they can give us a reasonable amount of time to see if we can come up with some sort of purchase plan or purchase option. So. And again, thank you to Bruce for all his help. He's been really, really valuable in helping us through this, and came to our Parks Board meeting last week and gave a nice presentation. And so I just like to publicly thank him for all his work. Thank you.
Mr. Keats, can I ask a couple follow-up questions? The DNR property that we're looking at, I know there's a timeline involved, as you just mentioned. Are there any lease options in the interim? Or is it strictly a purchase only to satisfy the trust?
That remains to be seen, talking with DNR. I think there are numerous options that are on the table, so we would explore all of those. And so at this point, I think the discussion points are wide open, so I think a lot of options are possible.
Okay. One other point, from our last Planning Commission meeting, a representative from DNR, Rich Scribner, came and talked about the added value in upzoning the 7-acre parcel along Meridian. is there any, I guess, trade as far as we're providing, if the city chooses to upzone that area, it would be providing additional value towards that trust. Could that be used to offset anything that the city would be doing at the 25-acre parcel, or is that not possible? I don't know if you or Bruce can answer that.
I'd have to defer to Bruce on that. Without talking to them, I'd just be purely guessing. So.
Yeah, I've not had a conversation along those lines myself, so but I haven't really had as much This is all happening very quickly, actually.
Thanks.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone who came and spoke. This is going to be an ongoing process. Bruce called out the agenda earlier that there's nothing's going to happen tonight. There's quite a few meetings. There's a lot of information to digest. Procedurally, at this point, what we'll do is, so we've had a great chance to hear from the public, and I've taken pages of notes. I see a whole bunch of pages of notes here. Oh.
If I had a question for MC Coast, is that something I can do tonight, or will I to the legal counsel, or tonight, or would that be something for next meeting?
Yeah, if you have a question for them, well, we'll get to that in just a second. So at this point, we there's a whole. There's actually a good segue to it that on the commission, there's a bunch of questions now that we need to go and ask Bruce and follow up and have a discussion. So we'll. I don't know what the technical term is for it, but that's the public testimony that we'll take tonight, and now is a chance for the commission to talk to Bruce and ask MC Coast or other people questions and follow up and just continue the conversation that way. So
yeah, I believe what you'd be doing would be suspending public comment for the evening, and then taking that back up on November the 18th.
All right. Procedurally, do we need to do that with a motion?
No. As the chair, you can identify that as how the meeting is progressing.
Okay, so we will suspend public testimony for the evening, and then we will continue it on November 18th?
That's correct.
All right. So at this point, then, questions. David, sounded like you had something to bring up.
Oh, so am I able to ask for questions to the landowner? Okay.
Please.
Yeah. Could I ask you a couple questions at the mic? Thanks for being here tonight and giving your speech there about potential for the property. I guess I had a couple questions, and I brought up this one at the study session that was this past meeting. And I see. Can you tell me the appraised value of the current property in question?
I don't think that an appraisal has been done. I don't know of. I don't know that there has been a recent appraisal.
Okay, because on the website it does say that it's $1.3 million, I think, which seems very low, but it's on the website with regards to the Hillside Garden. So I just didn't know where that came from. I didn't.
And I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. There's going to be the assessor's going to have value, but the value that's on the website, I don't have an answer for that right now.
Okay. And I guess another question I have, there's a couple. One, would MC Coast ever be open to discussions with the city? I know funds are very, very, we're low on funds with regards to buying pieces of open spaces. But would MC Coast be even, or Coast Equity, MC Coast, LLC, would they be open to the possibility of acquiring the land in open space for perpetuity? That'd be one question I'd love to. I don't have to hear from you tonight necessarily, but it'd be nice to hear at the next meeting. And the other one is that we've heard from like 4 people, looks like in the community, that I noted requesting possibly like an open house, and it sounds like a really exciting opportunity for MC Coast to be able to show off and showcase what maybe a cluster development's going to look like. I don't know if you all be open to that.
We haven't done any, part of it is this process to understand what the potential zoning would be before, putting together a conceptual site plan or something like that. But I'll ask that question, whether or not at this stage, we can get that done. There's a cost associated with that, but
Right.
If that's, I'll ask that question. I understand that the visuals, especially the visuals, are helpful when
Yeah.
we're talking about are this, are that, and that sort of thing. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, Bruce. Question for you. So the property is currently zoned R9600.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
And-
no, our 9600 is
And,
correct.
and we're talking about the MC Coast property, and we're considering this kind of this greater area and this kind of this cluster idea that we're talking about. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on what the process would be for that, whether it's an overlay or a new zone, and I know we don't have our arms around that totally yet, but what is the process to get that established, and how much time are we talking about? Because the property's there right now, and time is money, and if you buy a property like that, you've spent a lot of money and you're losing opportunity cost. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is what is the gap here for the property owner if they're kind of going to try to work with us, and what's that process going to look like? And I know we don't have it totally nailed down, but
Well, I think I'll split it into two sections. One is that currently the zoning is R9600. The applicant can submit a development application under that designation. I have no idea what the the viability of that, but they do have that ability right now. The clustering concept would be something that I have not gone a long ways as thinking about how it would be. Primarily, I introduced it to the commission because the commission at the study session kind of said, this is something we might like to look at. And I think it might be an opportunity for us to take a look at some of those challenging properties that we have as a way to preserve more of the open space than we are currently doing. Essentially, what would happen is that I envision that the commission would prepare a memorandum to or a letter to the council. I would take that letter to the council and have them formally initiate a code amendment to do that kind of a thing. Now, this is one that could be one of these things where we split off two different tracks here. We could continue to do this comp and plan provision and look at the area, or we could put this one on hold while we worked on the clustering, or vice versa. There's a lot of different options there for us. But I think the first step would be if the commission is interested in exploring something like this, we get that to the council and let them initiate a potential code amendment. In theory, what you could do is that you could work on both at the same time. Now remember, this is a plan and code amendment. So what that means is a plan amendment is a once-a-year thing we can do. This is not going to be decided in the first few months of 2016. This is going to be one of those things that are going to get wrapped up with the other plan amendments we have going, and we're going to have to take care of this sometime in 2016. So what will happen here is that this is a longer process than potentially a code amendment could be. So there's a lot of options there, but I think the first step would be for the commission to say, look, this is something we really want to explore, and we get the council's feedback on that.
Just a quick follow-up. So we've heard a little bit about the different zones tonight, and the R4000 and how that calculation is completed, and is that truly based on the buildable area on a piece of property?
Yes, what I did for the, and not so much the MC Coast because I don't have good data, but I have really good data on the Canyon Ridge condominium site, and I can outline through our GIS, our Graphic Information System software program, the area that was developed, basically that was cleared, that was put roadways and parking areas and those things, and I can actually segment that off, and I can perform a very accurate area calculation of that, and I can say, okay, this is the net area of this property, which is 7.25 acres, and then you just, what does that go into 75, which is the number of units there, and you get about 10 units per acre. And that's basically how that did. And we also did, of course, the calculation based upon a gross concept, which was about 4.4 dwelling units per acre. So that's, that was something that was fairly easy to do. You could apply the same kind of a approach to MC Coast, but because we have so little
really great information on the site. We don't have the ability to look at how the roadways would fit into that property or anything like that because we haven't done that analysis. And the city would not do that analysis because that's something the developer would do. I don't have the same ability to make that kind of a rough calculation.
Okay. But what you're saying, I think, is that the density calculation for a site that's zoned R4000 is not as much based on the gross property area, more based on the net buildable area.
Well, and that's what I did for the Canyon Ridge condominiums because it was a very easy one to do. I.e., it was easy to determine what the net developable area is.
So if I have a property in Bothell, it's an R4000, and there's 2 acres of it, and only an acre is developable, is the density calculation based on the 2 acres or the 1 acre?
1 acre.
It is, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. That's what it is.
Yes. It's a net calculation.
Gotcha. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm done.
Yeah.
I have a few questions. Traffic was brought up several times. In our packet, we talked about it being a minimal impact, whatever development's done in this area. Can we bring back to the next public hearing the traffic study as part of the comp plan for this area? Is there any additional data that we can provide in this packet so we know what the grade is for 228th, for example, in Meridian, as far as
The level of service, you mean? Yeah. Oh, okay. I can see if we can find that. Essentially, here's what makes this really complex is because we are doing it on it's basically a corridor level of service. It's a really complex model they have to run. But I can find out what data we have available that would be able to plug into just this area. It's hard to do. And basically the idea was that when I was speaking with the transportation folks, the numbers we were talking about as far as potential development, and there's not that much property here. We're talking about 40 acres. I mean, it's just not enough traffic to cause a real change in how the system operates. I know it does not operate well right now. I mean, there's just no doubt about that. But the impact of this on that is not something that they can really say, well, you're going to take another 4 or 5 seconds or something like that in an intersection. That's a sophistication I don't know that we have right now. We can eventually get some pretty good data once we pick out kind of some zoning limitations. You know, okay, well, we're thinking about maybe going with a R4000, for example, on this paper's property. We can start plugging that into our model, and then we can kind of get some of those numbers. But with all these different scenarios, it's tough. What I will do here is that I will get some more data from the traffic engineering folks and have them maybe even come to the next hearing and say, okay, well, and they can go through their basically their calculation methodology much more clearly than I can.
Okay. Yeah, some of my questions are derived from our last session when we looked at East Riverside Drive. And even though that was, again, not a big change in the total density, I think we requested some additional traffic information in that area. And on a similar point, we were also looking at landslide areas. We had a map that was zoomed out. It was hard to tell what areas were red and critical and what was fine. We're talking about steep slopes with the coast property. Do you know if that's going to be part of the study that's completed in, when was it, July of next year?
The King County study?
Oh. Okay. So we're not going to get any additional information on potential hazard areas that would be useful in our decision making from
probably not for this site
county or state.
However, one of the things that always happens is that any time you have a slope greater than 8% in the city of Bothell, a geotechnical engineering assessment must be completed. That assessment that is provided to the city by the developer is peer reviewed by the city's own expert. So usually by the time we get to that, we have a very good feeling for the stability, if you would, of these hillsides and their geologically hazardous potential. And there can be a very steep slope that is still not geologically hazardous. It just depends on where the glaciers sat and compressed that soil. And if this is one of those places where the glaciers sat and compressed the soil, and you got really steep slopes, but they're incredibly stable and they're not going to be, that's where we get into the issue of people taking their bulldozer view and creating the site to fit the single-family residential lots. So that's one of the things that always happens. We always get that type of detailed stuff with the development application.
Okay. following back on transportation, just one other point. I don't know if Sherman will include it, but I'd like to look at transit options through that area too. So I was looking on Sound Transit. It looks like there's one bus route that goes on 228.
Yeah, I think there's only one up in this area, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That'd be another item I'd like to see. What about, I'm not trying to get into the weeds, but I'm trying to get a better picture of where we're headed here. Sewer off of 228th. I live on kind of the other side of the DNR property. Sewer infrastructure at the top of the hill and all the way down, is that already in place?
Most of it is. One of the things we have the general layout of where the Alderwood Water and Sewer District, when this is their district, where they've got their lines. I don't have really great data as to depth, and that's one of those things that, engineering determination would have. No matter what happens, any development on that piece of property, whether it's at its existing R9600 zoning classification or another one, would be required to have sanitary sewer.
Okay. And then as far as a few comments that we received from folks in the audience, let's see. One comment by Ms. Walter was talking about wider dispersion of notification. That was also brought up at the Parks Board meeting. Is that a plan with this area, or what?
Well, we can certainly discuss that. What we did is we followed our standard, which is the 300-foot, and in the newspaper record and all those kind of things. With the director's permission, I can certainly discuss with the director about the ability of expanding it. I don't have an issue with expanding it, but as long as it's not the entire city, because that's really expensive. But we can certainly go a little bit further to the south without a lot of additional costs. But
sure, these things, they do have a cost, and I think that how the commission may want to weigh their decision on that question is how effective is the current noticing boundary of 300 feet. If you think that's been effective enough for the neighborhood, then I would suggest keeping it as it is. If you think that that's not effective enough, we can certainly increase it to 600 feet if you like. It does have a cost, but we'll absorb it.
Okay, I think that's something we can all sort of discuss. I may have been blind, but I tried to drive the perimeter of the property, and I didn't see a public notice board. I may have missed it, but usually we have one of those when we're talking about zoning changes, and I just want to make sure that all of our notification is
I will make sure that got installed. There was one up there for
it's been a while,
but I will make sure that is, or if it's not been installed, we'll make sure and get it up.
And where would it be placed?
Well, probably it would be placed upon the intersection of Meridian and 228th Street.
Okay.
That makes the most sense because there's a wide spot you can pull over to the side of the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe I might not have looked on the right spot, but I was kind of tracking around the FEMA property.
Yes, and we did have some notice boards. I'll check for you. No problem.
So, Bruce, is that for this whole area study that we're doing? Or
Yes.
is that just for, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's hard to put 20 or 30 of those signs out because everybody says, what's going on?
Other comments that we received, there were several comments about an open house, and we haven't done one of those before, but I could see some benefit. I'm really familiar with the property, and I have a hard time envisioning whether it's 4,000 or 9,600, what can be, I'm not a developer, so what can be done to preserve the space because it's so steep and at the bottom it's fairly wet. And again, I don't have the vision for that. So I would like to see some options of what we would be looking at in either of these scenarios before we make kind of a final decision.
Boy, that's hard because that's something the city just doesn't have the expertise to do, to lay out a potential development site, because there's so many parameters that we don't get involved with. And it's also hard to ask a property owner to provide that type of a analysis because, well, I may not be wanting to develop it that way, and I'm having to do all these expensive kind of analyses. That's what makes this process so difficult, is because we can't look at, well, if we did it like this, we can do it like this, because this is not a development review process. This is a zoning and plan designation process, and there is always a little bit of area where, okay, we aren't having a lot of understanding of the details, but that's left for the very detailed and prescriptive development review process. I can look at some options there, but I can't promise that we can come up and say, well, here's development option A, B, and C. That's something that I don't think we can craft up for the commission in this process that we're in right now. What we could do is we could suggest some locations for commission and public to go to see the different zoning densities. Okay, well, if you go to this property line on 220th, you'll see this density. If you go to this property over here, you'll see that density. We can do something like that that may assist you, but I'm just really hesitant on promising that we'll go to an open house and have a bunch of nice, beautiful graphics that show how it could be developed in one scenario or another.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that too, Bruce. I think if we were going to have an open house workshop, it would be advisable to close the public hearing on the proposal that's in front of you and direct staff to conduct open houses and come back in several months later with the results of those open houses and then start over. It would be difficult to do it in kind of in the middle of the discussion of these options. It gets kind of convoluted with the proposals for the different land use options that are being discussed with the commission today. So, but if you decide to do that, we can certainly head down that path.
Okay, thanks.
Can I add something to that real quick? Just from my perspective, it seems like if there is going to be an open house, I mean, we've got an individual property owner that's making a proposal to do a comp plan change. Maybe the way to do that is if they feel like that's beneficial to their proposal, that maybe they would take that upon themselves. I don't know for sure, but that would be, it doesn't seem like it's really the city's responsibility to put together a bunch of options for what is being privately proposed. If it were something that were a bigger picture for the whole area that the city's pushing, I think that would be the case. But I think maybe the developer might be convinced that would be a good idea to do an open house outside of this process. That's completely up to them, but that would be one avenue to do that.
I was going to talk to Randall about that idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and one final comment. Ms. Anderson, you brought up a good point regarding our responsibility here, and I'm not trying to shirk our mission on what we're providing to the City Council. They do, I think, take it with weight because they don't have as much time to dig into all the details. So I thought that was a good point you made earlier. I just wanted to say thanks for that.
So I'd just like to follow up on Commissioner Cabe's point about transportation, and so I'd be interested on Meridian, not just what the counts are and even what the projected counts are, but where we're at with regards to re-engineering improvements on Meridian, whether it's widening the road, bike lanes, sidewalks, the whole bit. So I'd like to know where we are in terms of both the engineering on that as well as the funding, and as well as the intersections of Meridian and 240th and 228th, because I think that's relevant to this.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. If you could have the transportation folks come back with that would be great. Thank you.
Bring a posse.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. I heard a lot of the people that gave testimony have concerns about the schools, and it brings up a question that I've frankly always had. Is one of them mentioned that the school district, North Shore School District, does not currently have an impact fee or a mitigation fee that they charge, and it's been that way for years. I've always wondered why, and I would love to have some feedback or some input if you know, Bruce, or if there's somebody from the school district that come and explain that to us, because it seems to me that it seems odd to me that they don't charge that, because most jurisdictions or most school districts do have a mitigation fee. So do you guys know anything about that? And if not, is there a possibility of getting more information about that?
I think I can help with that. I think there is a discussion that can be generated with the North Shore School District on the topic. There certainly is in the Bothell Municipal Code a process for assessing and collecting an impact fee for schools, but the school district has said every year they want to keep it open, but they don't want to pull the trigger. So we've kind of followed, and generally it takes an action of both the school board and the city council to enact that fee. And we would rely upon the school district to give us some input and share with the city their capital facilities plan that demonstrates forecast of growth and how that relates to capital facility programming. We need all of that information from them on a technical level before we can proceed. And it might be a good discussion to have with the Planning Commission. Yeah.
As a bit of bystander on something like that, it seems like if they are not pushing for a mitigation fee, they must feel like they've got the school thing covered. That they can somehow account for the growth that is part of our mandate by the state. Otherwise, I would think they'd be really pushing hard for getting mitigation fees. And I see portables at all these schools too, and I don't know what the school district's position is as far as where do they have land, what are their plans. It'd be maybe interesting to have somebody from the school district come and talk to us and explain a little bit more about that, because it's something, frankly, that perplexes me too.
They definitely have a planning wing, and I think it's encouraged by the Growth Management Act to have that communication between the planning wing of the school district and the planning commission of the city to kind of exchange that information. Maybe we can learn more about the policies of square footage in classrooms and accommodation of forecast of growth.
Was that something that you, Bruce, could look into and find out if maybe they would be able to, whether that's a presentation or they just provide us some data that we could look at or something? It'd be really useful, I think, to have that. I think that could be made available to the public, I would think, as well, or probably already is available. So,
yes.
I heard a comment about, talking about maximum density, but and that there's built into the code discussions about how many homes you can build. There's also built into the code some discussion about what the minimum is as well. That there's a mandate that you have to build to your zoning if that's possible. And I want to point that out because I heard some discussions around, well, they can build less homes. Well, in a lot of cases, I don't think they really have that choice. And can you talk a little bit more about that minimum density requirement?
Yes, our code actually does make a very specific provision that says that a single-family residential lot, for example, cannot be greater than 1.5 times the minimum lot area. And it has a similar provision for attached dwelling. You can't be less than, I believe I'd have to look it up again. I think it's 50 or 75%. That is a very strong provision, and I know that some of the folks had mentioned the Growth Management Act and said, well, we should dismiss it. We don't have that luxury as a city. We are required to comply with the Growth Management Act. The city is monitored through a buildable lands analysis to see how we are meeting our provisions of the Growth Management Act. In fact, some of the people were pointing out correctly from the PSRC that our Canyon Park Regional Center is underperforming, the most underperforming regional center in our region. And that is a very real concern the city has because we are required to follow those mandates. So it's always really difficult when we get into these discussions. And, well, yeah, we'd love to have our 40,000 zoning everywhere and those kind of things, but we are not allowed to do that. It's just, I shouldn't speak that harshly, but that is, that's the cold hard reality. We do have a minimum number of housing and population and growth that we must provide.
But on a given parcel in a given zone, the developer doesn't necessarily have the flexibility to say, oh, we're only going to build to 50% of the potential or something like that. There's also code that governs that. Oh,
yes, absolutely. Yeah, that is right out of the municipal code.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And then just a couple comments or questions about the idea of clustering and the timing of that. I think I heard you say that any comprehensive plan amendment that we're going to entertain in 2016 is going to pretty much take a good part of the year to get through because they have to kind of all be done as one one docket, so to speak.
Yes.
That being said, is it possible that a clustering ordinance, I think I know the answer to this question, but that within a given year, given planning year, and a docket, that a clustering ordinance could also go through the same review process and be adopted within that same year? Is that a possibility?
Certainly is possible, yes.
Okay.
It would be an impact upon our work program, which is already filled up.
Sure, yeah.
But again, it's a matter of moving things around.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is that possibility of looking into that may not necessarily take any more time or have a later approval date than an individual private property owner's proposal. Is that right?
I think that's fair to say.
Okay. And then you mentioned that if we wanted to ask the council, make a recommendation to the council, we would have to write a letter, but can we just pass on to you as a motion that we would like that to be done? I don't know who the letter writer is in this group, but
Well, what would happen is staff would prepare the letter for the
Okay.
chair's signature, and
Okay.
and it kind of formalizes the process a little bit.
Sure,
And we
yeah.
prefer to act that way because it basically gives us a really good tracking as to what is going on here.
but from us, it would come as a motion or something for the staff to
Yes,
draft
yeah.
that letter.
Basically, what would occur is the planning commission would take a motion and they'd say, okay, yeah, we do recommend the city council investigate a clustering provision and grant the planning commission the ability to work on that as part of your 2016 work program.
All right. Thank you.
Any other comments? Eric, David? So I had a few follow-up questions. So one of it is about clustering. Is that something, can we go ahead with that regardless of how this is zoned? Just because that sounds like a good option to have in the arsenal. I mean, when we're looking at zoning across the city, right now what we see is, there's some situations where clustering would be a good thing. We've described situations and we pointed at some examples where it would preserve open space and it makes everybody happy. And so far, some of those examples have been kind of flukes. It got grandfathered in or somehow it's circumvented. It'd be nice if we could make that easier. But my understanding of the system right now is that there's not actually a zoning for clustered. You've got R9600, which isn't what you want. You've got R4000, which isn't what you want. And then there's this thing out there that's what we do want, but it's not one of the options. Can we go ahead and just make that an option? Proceed down that path, letter, kind of like what Eric is talking about, regardless of what happens here, just to have that option available? Is there a disadvantage to that?
Provided the council initiates that code amendment, yes. That could be a standalone discussion topic that could have its own process and its own life, if you would, that would be, wouldn't necessarily have to involve these properties.
Right. So I realize we can't, we are not empowered to actually create that, but can we initiate, would there be any disadvantage to initiating that process to ask council to give planning that option to use down the road?
I don't think there'd be anything I need to look at our work schedule because it's I got to take that into consideration.
I think what Bruce is trying to explain is it's possible. We have to fit it in and prioritize it with everything else that the council wants us to do.
Okay. And is that so this is a naive question, but is that the only path forward? I mean, does it have to come through a formal letter from staff on planning? Can we just submit letters to council directly, say, hey, we have this recommendation, and
Well, procedurally.
Yeah, I think procedurally it'd be better if it was a commission recommendation,
Yeah.
and then we take that up. And again, procedurally, if you actually want to get really technical, our municipal code actually says how we're supposed to administer code amendments, and that does include council initiation of any code amendment that occurs. So we have to have the council initiation before we can really start working on it. But I think that the best way to do it would be some type of a letter from the commission to the council. And then we schedule on the council agenda, and we let you know, hey, the council is going to consider this item on some night, and we have you there, and you explain to the council, in addition to your letter, what your thoughts are.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. And then one other thing I wanted to check was just make sure that my understanding of the options here. So we've heard a bunch of different options from testimony and from the packet, and I want to double check that I understand this properly. So currently the property is owned by MC Coast. It's R9600, and so one option is just status quo, and MC Coast can do whatever they want, pending obviously the existing laws. So they could go, they could build the trees, they could build the houses, cut down the trees, do that. A second option would be to change the zoning to try to preserve the open space, and so that may be what we want is the clustering. We don't have it. We've got this R4000. That's not quite the same. There's concerns that something may go wacky there. So that's kind of being forced into a tough dilemma there. And then a third option would be that MC Coast transfers the property. The city acquires it. Somebody else acquires it. Obviously that gets to an economics issue. I think David had asked what is the cost of the property. Certainly, to evaluate that third option, we would need to understand the economics of the situation. So I don't know. It sounds like we don't have the numbers yet, but if that's feasible to have the numbers to obtain the numbers for the next November 18th.
Well, an appraisal is a pretty complex piece of work that's gone through. That you can pull up the assessor's information, but that's not necessarily the appraised value. Appraisals are $10,000 to $15,000 in cost if it's a really good one. So that's one that'd be really difficult again for the city to implement. So now we know what the value of this property is. Should we go approach it? It might be better for this to kind of go back to the Parks Board and have the Parks Director have a discussion with the property owners and say, hey, is there any interest here? And maybe they say, yeah, there is, and we let that process occur in its natural state, if you would. But we still have this comp plan and zoning request in front of us that we have to act upon. The property owner has a right to have a decision from the city on this topic. So those are two things that, kind of almost like two different jugs, if you would. Basically, there's always the option for the city to acquire that parcel, but that's a really different aspect than what's before the Planning Commission, which is what's the appropriate zoning for the site.
Okay, thanks.
Can I pipe in real quick?
Yeah.
So on that subject, I guess Pat and I served on Parks Board for several years, and you work for years and you come up with this ProSAP plan, and it takes into account how much open space we need, how much recreational space we need, and then there's all these options of where we can spend our money. Some of it's acquisition, some of it's development, and so we went through that for years of prioritizing. Okay, we need more open space in this area, and so it prioritizes, right? It puts a priority on acquisition of parks space, and so there's a lot of thought that goes into that, and it's not just thought from people like us that are planning. It's thought from parks type people, and now we have a parks director, and so I guess it just seems like going that route would take it's a real kind of interruption in the city's already established priorities for parks and open space. I'm not saying that it couldn't be done, but I think that you're looking at a longer term revision to the ProSAP plan if we're going to try to get maybe switch one in and switch one out or something like that. So it's just it's a pretty involved process for the parks plan to get revised, and not that the city has to stick with that, but it generally guides the council and the city as to where they're spending their money, because there's a lot of time that's been spent in putting that together. So anyway, for what that's worth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. We did spend a lot of time putting that together. I also don't want us to miss on the opportunity if it does make sense to acquire it for the city. I don't even know if that's an option or if Coast would entertain it, but Once it's gone, obviously. So if we do have the opportunity now to start the discussion and see if it's even plausible, I'd like to evaluate that before we alter the zoning and kind of put the cart before the horse. I'd like to at least see if it's an option.
As a general rule, in the Bothell area, raw land transacts somewhere around $15 to $20 per square foot. You've got 710,028 square feet, roughly, and so at $15 a foot, that's somewhere around $10.65 million.
Yeah, I mean, you're an expert in this field, so I defer to you, but realistically, I don't think we should be doing pencil whip
No. I'm not.
numbers here because the site's a little bit difficult. I mean, there's other things that.
All I'm saying is just a broad brush. You're looking at somewhere between 10 to, and you're right. That assumes that a lot of it is usable, and there may be some areas that are not usable. But that kind of gets you into the ballpark.
Thanks. So I guess, Bruce, at this point, what do you need from?
Well, I think I've heard a number of items that the commission would like to have some more data on, specifically more data upon the traffic. We'll come back with you with some discussion about the expanded area, and we're going to explore the clustering provision with your permission. If the commission is saying, yeah, this is something we want to do, we will do a little bit more exploration on that. I didn't spend a lot of analysis time on it because in case the commission said, we don't want to do that, and I don't have quite that much time to do that, but it sounds as if that's something the commission is interested in, and we'll do a little bit of sit down in the office and figure out what the next best step would be, because it's pretty complex.
Maybe that's your first task in the new city hall.
No. Unfortunately, it won't be.
No.
Do you know if there are neighboring cities that have a zoning like that?
Like what now?
That have a clustering provision?
Oh, there's a lot of jurisdictions that have clustering provisions. We're probably one of the few who do not have a clustering provision.
Does that make it easier for us to
certainly.
do it?
I have no objection. I have no qualms about stealing from other locations.
We've done it before.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't say stealing. I say looking at their...
Taking inspiration from.
Yes, there you go.
Any final comments that you guys want to pass on to Bruce?
Bruce, if there's any unintended consequences of doing a cluster overlay, I'd certainly like to know what that would be as well.
Well, and yeah, I hear what you're saying, and,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that I have to start thinking about is
Right.
what are some of those potentials.
See, I think there's some unintended consequences if we do nothing. I think there's some unintended consequences if we just, blanket approve a zone change. So we really, really need to be careful and think through what those are as well.
You bet.
David, did you have a comment? Oh. All right. Well, I think at this point we've given you a fair bit of direction.
Plenty enough to work on. Thank you.
Yes.
Actually,
Yes.
So, Bruce, I was also at the Parks Board discussion of the ProSAP and or of this potential. It was awesome. It's really exciting for me because like tonight where the citizens of Bothell came out. It's just awesome. We love it when we have people here coming to the mic, giving us their take on things because that's really what we're here for, is the citizens of Bothell. So now I know the parks gave direction for notification for the FEMA portion, and there was some to all the neighborhoods or something like that. And if that was the case, like when does that go out? When should people be expecting to get the mailings and such?
Well, that'll be a notification for the acquisition of the DNR site,
right.
which is following a really different path, as you heard Director Keats identify tonight. They're just starting that process, so it may be a few months before they hear back from the city as to when a meeting before the Parks Board will be, because that'll be. And here's part of the thing is that some of this work has been done by the Parks and Recreation Board, some of it has been done by the Planning Commission. That's going to be one of those things that's going to be in the Parks and Recreation Board bailiwick, if you would.
Yeah, I guess I would love the opportunity as a commission to give that opportunity to notify even more people around the area of the potential zoning change for the coast property.
Oh, yes, and that's one of the things we're going to actually discuss.
All right. Well, at this point, then, we've had a very productive evening. Thank you again for everybody's testimony.
And you could
we'll
have
take
a motion to continue to November 18th. That'd be great. At the new City Hall.
And can I get a
I'll
second?
second.
Oh, that was quick. Did we get a second?
I second.
Oh. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on. Study sessions. Sounds like none. Is there any old business? All right. Bruce, any old business?
No
Reports?
No reports.
All right. Motion
None.
to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Thank
Thank you.